Screen. No, not yet. I've been meaning to make like scripts and stuff, so that way I have something to post. But so, do I have one? Yes. Do I use it? Not really, just because I don't have anything yet. Right, to set it up on my favorite. There we go. If I need to. Well, as long as you're not muting Discord, it should be fine. Stretch screen, fit to screen. There we go. I don't know that. Could you turn up CSS? Can't hear him well. Okay. Let me know if this is better, Delta V. Alright. A bit better. And I can hide this for now until I need it. The audio. Yes, I know, Astro Kiwi. I'm gonna have to open this up in a separate thing. Or can I? I can. Thank goodness I have two. So what will tonight's debate entail? The primary topic, as you can see in the top, is we're going to be talking about Starship and especially HLS. You know, if we need to deviate from HLS to, you know, just Starship plain, you know, that can happen. But for the most part, this started because I was reading a lot of his comments about the problems with HLS Starship, which you know, I will admit there are some, but that's where we'll discuss to get into specifics. That way, we get to hear from both sides equally, and we're not just assuming anything, if that makes sense. So,
you're talking to somebody on the channel.
Well, that was somebody in the chat, but that was kind of the open room. So, indeed, like I said, the big thing about the debate is I just want to keep it fair and open, so that way, you know, obviously, if we're gonna make a claim, just try to back it up is a big thing. So, let's see how many people we have.
I'll be going off of basically what we've done for the episodes, and I didn't do all the reading, so some of the stuff we might have to go hunting for articles or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, we're in the video in the lower left. We're normally providing the citation by website. In the newer videos, we didn't bother doing that because when we're including an article or whatever, then we'll include the byline and the date, so people can just go and look at it from there.
Okay. All right. So, volume mixer. I'm trying to turn it up. Sorry, I was talking to chat. They keep saying that you're quiet, so I'm trying to take care of that.
You can hear me all right, though, right?
I can, but apparently they're quiet to you. You're quiet to them, apparently, and so desktop audio.
Doesn't have a mic volume at this end.
All right. There. See if turning the gain up a little bit, and I'll adjust as we go. But with
you're not the you down a bit, then I'll
sounds like it's not direct audio on. If are you hearing background? Are you hearing echo? That's the big thing, because I'm getting direct, desktop audio picking up in chat. So my computer is detecting it, like he has heard through something else. If you're hearing echo, let me know, because my mic is sensitive. That's different.
I'm not hearing any echo. I'm hearing you pretty clean and dry.
Okay then. Yeah, because I don't have headphones. I need to get something for that. So yeah, I really am worried about that. So I don't know. I don't have headphones. I need to get something for that. So
I don't have headphones.
Really am
worried.
Okay, I just turned it turned my stream audio on, and you sound fine. So anyway, so with everybody, you know, enough people here to satisfy me, let's just go ahead and dive in, and let you just go ahead and start with just go ahead and just start by describing specifically what your open-ended thoughts on Starship are. Try to, both sides. What do you think are great? What do you think are bad? What do you think it needs to improve on? Just, not anything specific, just the whole program.
Well, for the most part right now, I think that far too many people are making far too much out of CGI images and not really taking into account the actual dimensions of what's being built and that kind of thing. Which is why we started up the channel with episode 1, just giving a brief overview of, if you take the dimensions of this ship and imagine what the floor plan of it's going to look like, can it do what Musk says it's going to do? And we find that it doesn't. Instead of 100 people, maybe it can carry a dozen, 20 tops kind of thing. Look into the water requirements and the shielding requirements and the food requirements of everybody that would be going along, what they would need, how long the transit times are going to be, and really none of it adds up, right? This debate, no matter which way it goes, is going to be able to be resolved considerably once Musk starts producing actual floor plans and actual systems and proof of concept and proof of in situ production on Mars. With the water recycling. The water recycling is going to have to be 100%. The food recycling, the waste recycling is going to have to be 100%. What equipment is coming along with them? What are they going to live in? What are they going to wear? What are they going to eat? None of these questions have been answered at all. And everybody keeps saying, no, we're going to the moon and we're going to Mars. We're going to do all this stuff with this ship that right now has never even broken the sound barrier.
Okay, and those are all fair points. Trust, I definitely see where you're coming from, but would you consent that maybe those are some of those questions, especially like Mars related, maybe that's a little bit too far future? And I mean, you're right. A lot of people are jumping the gun when it comes to it'll do these things, but do we?
Isn't it not? Because the claims have already been made that we should be on Mars by now with something SpaceX made. Like Red Dragon was supposed to be there by now. Next year, a cargo Starship was supposed to be there. 2 years after that, in 2024, that's when Crew was supposed to land and use all the supplies up that were sent in 2022. So, considering the state of where it is now, that's far future. However, we're already past the deadlines originally set.
Okay, and like I said, I definitely understand where you're coming from. It's a lot of those just seem like it's kind of semantics, at least in my perspective. But again, they are valid, at least in that we don't have these plans. But in regards to HLS, since we're trying to, this Mars, 2030, maybe later, and the plans to get there, they're all kind of moot now anyway. But again, HLS 2025 or sooner. If I remember correctly, you mentioned something about issues with it landing. I think you mentioned landing legs or something to that effect.
Well, yeah, you're not going to bury the ass end of this thing into the regolith. You do eventually have to take off from the surface, even if it survives the landing.
Which,
you take a look at the crush legs there right now up on your screen. If you're landing in the equivalent of talcum powder, and you're not going to have a stable base. And then you're dealing with a vehicle whose access port is 100 feet in the air. It's coming down by cable crane, which is not a smart move. And that's through the center of gravity. Depending on what your load is, you're going to be taking the center of gravity outside the ship, depending on the weight of the load. And trying to get it down in freezing conditions, right? Open space pretty much on the moon. And I don't know if you ever tried wrapping up an extension cord in the winter. Doesn't work well. Wire cables don't work well in the cold.
True, but it could use potentially something like chains. Something more rigid could overcome that issue. Granted, you're right with those kinds of issues. However, I have heard alternative notions. Of course, nothing official, but notions that they may have an internal elevator or something similar, just to circumvent such an issue.
Well, yeah. Okay. But let's take a look at that. You have the elevator on the outside because you can't get to the bottom of the craft on the inside because that's where your propellant tanks and your rocket engines are. would have to completely redesign the ascent of that ship so that that elevator could get all the way down to the bottom, inside.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the notion was specifically that it would actually be sort of extended from the base. That way, it would just be like a half sphere off of the fuel tanks. That way, you would descend down on the side, but you're still in. You could use something like rails as opposed to, those cables. Which, on top of other issues you haven't mentioned, I will add. Let's assume the spacecraft shifts on the lunar surface. That would mean that it could put torsioning, cause it to swing, so on and so on.
I mean, depends on your landing site, right? How stable is your landing site going to be? Is the thing going to be straight up in the air? Are your legs going to be able to compensate for a 2% lean, a 4% lean? And then the whole thing behind Musk, one of the things that he likes to get quoted on is that, I forget how he puts it, but basically fewer parts, fewer problems, right? The best part is no part. Part for that is a ladder, right? Or some sort of, especially for the human egress, I don't know about the cargo and whatnot, but I don't see any ladder on the outside of that thing.
Yeah, and a ladder ultimately would not be the best idea given the height.
Just so much of it is taken at face value and none of it's questioned, and we got tired of going along with it. I mean, most of the guys here were Musk fans, and then we'd sit around Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever, with a couple beers in us, like, well, what do you think about this? Well, that doesn't make any freaking sense. Well, how about that? No, that doesn't make sense either. So those discussions became debates. Those debates became episodes.
And that makes sense.
Basically started. Episode 1 has always assumed that Musk could get this thing into orbit. Most of the episodes have assumed that he can get this thing into orbit. And here we are, 2 years later, still not in orbit.
But we are getting closer. You have to admit that we are getting much closer to that point.
Don't buy that. Most of the guys don't either. It's one of these things where, Hyperloop got to a certain point and then it got stalled. And the solar roofing got to a certain point and then they got stalled and they never worked. This is honestly becoming just another Hyperloop.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just recently had Starship stacked, so, I mean, we definitely have proof that it's at least...
Launch is not through the Max Q. Max Q isn't into orbit.
Which is fair, but I mean...
Start stepping back a little bit and making the extraordinary claims prove themselves before you start believing them.
Well, like I said, it's just with... they are making progress. It isn't that they've completely stopped. Their biggest issue has been the launch site being incomplete, which is almost completely done. The launch pad being incomplete, which is almost done. And the only thing really remaining left is to test the
thing that's come up here recently. Everything that he's doing down at Boca Chica is not in compliance with what he was granted with in his original EIS in 2014. That was commissioned in 2012. The launch tower and arms, none of that's permitted. The FAA can tell him to tear that down. He's just kind of going ahead full force and thinking that he's untouchable, and that's another problem. He's ruining people's lives down in Boca Chica, even though some people say, he's making the area better. I don't buy that. He's in the middle of 4 nature preserves that he's going to destroy when this thing blows up on a pad.
Well, to be fair, NASA was in that same boat with the Saturn V. If that thing went off, the Saturn V exploded, it was comparable to a small yield nuclear bomb blast. So,
and it's going to be bigger than that. However, and this is what some people don't understand, is that at Kennedy, at Cape Canaveral, they built the Space Center, then they bought the land around it to make a nature preserve. Guy moved into the middle of 4 nature preserves and started taking them over to build his launch pads. So anybody who thinks that what NASA did is equivalent to what Musk has done is completely out to lunch.
But however, it does appear that FAA and other groups are starting to come to terms, and the reviews are coming back mostly positive. There are, of course, some concerns, some issues, But
you got to take a look at the quality of those reviews. The people who are in opposition to what's happening in Boca Chica are your environmentalist lawyers, the people who live there directly. You've got a lot of people with really strong scientific backgrounds saying, this isn't right, you need to do something about this. But you have on the other side, yeah, you've got more people saying, yes, I love rockets. Nobody gives a shit if you like rockets. That's not the point. The point with this is that's a draft programmatic environmental assessment, and that is telling the FAA environmental concerns they have. I like rockets, a positive environmental impact. Anybody who just went on there to say, stop progress, don't do this, don't do that, means nothing.
And some points that I'm seeing mentioned is the comments about, what about the jobs it is creating potentially,
Local jobs? Nope. Get people in.
I will confess that I have seen a lot of people being hired in, because even I have seen job postings down here in Florida. However, again, the fact that those job postings are remaining open for so long probably isn't a sign that too many are being successfully hired out. Just saying that either the demand is not being met fast enough, but you're right. I will confess I have seen these job postings down here in Florida for Texas, but the fact they've been open for more than a year, so they are obviously not being hired at any sort of viable or successful productive rate.
That's one of the things about this channel that has really kind of amazed us, is how many people reach out to us and give us their stories. Like, we've got stories we can't publish about people who work at these certain facilities, that work at Tesla, they work down at Boca Chica, or they did. And we got a really strong feeling from the locals that, for the most part, want their spot back. I mean, Boca Chica for a launch site for orbital entry is a pathetic location. You've got a 4-degree window between the bottom of Florida and the top of Cuba to get those things into orbit. Very, very narrow window. You're much better off launching them from Canaveral, where you've got almost 180-degree swing. But launching them across the Gulf of Mexico through a very narrow slit location.
So what's your opinions if they were to, say, pause development in Boca Chica eventually? Because I agree, I think there's only so much they can do, but what if they were to move to Florida? They had initial plans to launch 39A, whatever one they own. That would bypass the environmental review, so... And yes, Delta V, you're right.
I don't remember the reasons right now was considered and dropped. Now they've got permit applications for 40. We're going to try to do a second site for Starship at 40. If they want to launch it from there, then they're not launching from the middle of a major bird migration corridor, and that's exactly where Boca Chica is. Boca Chica is the contact point for 500 species of birds that are flying up from South America to North America and back on an annual basis. And it's just not cool. On top of that, you've got all the turtle beaches. You've got two dozen, I think, animals that are on the federal or state level endangered lists. The only the small cat. Ever on the other one.
Yeah. And as other people have mentioned, is that there are obviously birds at KSC as well. So, I mean, and to be fair, you can't really go to any nature preserve without entering a problem like that.
But there's the piping plovers that they've got at Boca Chica. They've got a birding festival there for Rio Grande, right? The Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival. And that's like a $500 million a year event, just one event. And they take excursions out to Boca Chica for the plovers. And the nest tracking at that site has dropped from over 40 to a single nest in the time that Musk has been in Boca Chica. So those particular birds, and they're critically endangered, they're in trouble. They need help. Now, another thing that happens up in Florida, Canaveral, that is not happening at Boca Chica, is they have environmentalists actively working in the state parks around Kennedy that are keeping the stewardship of the nature preserves intact. And that's not happening at Boca Chica. In fact, when Highway State 4 or State Highway 4 gets closed down, then the environmentalists don't have access to that region anymore.
And one other thing I remember from, must have been a little over a year ago when Texas was freezing over, Boca Chica was the one responsible for providing power. I remember that was being burned. They were burning their methane stores to provide power for the nearby towns, if I remember correctly.
Now, I'd like to compare that to any of the hotels in Mexico. So what you're saying is, yeah, they care about the turtles because they provided a generator. That's all they provided was a generator, maybe the fuel, maybe the solar cells. I don't know if there's an electric generator or whatever. You go to any hotel in Mexico that's shoreside, and they have an active turtle egg recovery system. They see where the turtles are laying. They take the eggs out of the sand. They go and they put them in a protected pen. When the hatchlings come out, then hotel staff take these things to the shoreside at midnight, make sure all the turtles get back into the sea safely. You don't see SpaceX doing a goddamn thing like that.
But they still were providing assistance for people. They may not have taken care of the turtles, but they were providing warmth to the people in Texas that were freezing during that year.
Then that has nothing to do with the environment.
Well, I'm pointing out that Boca Chica has done good. I'm just pointing at an example where Boca Chica. I'm just pointing out an example where SpaceX has provided good, even if it's not environmental. Which, others have mentioned that others have mentioned examples, which I'll get to later. But the big thing, like I said, is that they provided good. They provided aid. Is my point.
About here aren't just like that they're actually doing something more than, well, we provided the generators, so we love the turtles. That's a token. That's not an initiative. That's not a program. A one-time thing they did, that they're not doing anymore.
Well, currently they don't need to. Texas no. So, like I said, it's just they have done some good, and although we have seen population drops, the big thing is SpaceX themselves are not an environmental group, and the FAA environmental groups that have been working there.
No, I stayed at Mexico's not an environmental group, and they release tens of thousands of turtles every month.
And good for them, but that doesn't mean that every company is obligated to. And I agree that maybe they could do better, but I certainly know they could do worse. I know there have been companies that have done drastically worse.
We're not here talking about them.
I understand. I'm just pointing out that while they have done some bad, they have done an equal amount. I could list good things, and you have right about others have mentioned they have released turtles, although I don't have an article on that, so I can't confirm them. So
They did. You might have gone to a turtle release at one of the sanctuaries across the bay or something like that, but SpaceX doesn't have a turtle program.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Somebody just linked something. SpaceX provide power generator that could save cold stuns. So
there was also a couple of years ago, and it was an underreported and undetermined cause of a big green turtle, and those are the most critically endangered. Those are the most rare ones. There's a big kill-off in that area a couple of years back that nobody could explain, and it wasn't a cold stun.
Oh man. Anyway, so, but if we want to get off environment for a moment, go back to HLS. Hopefully that's readable. Anyway, if we go back to HLS, one of your biggest concerns, I remember you saying, is that that it actually being able to settle into the regolith. So, what's your concern in specifics with the regolith?
Stability of it. You don't see Musk launching any of these vehicles from the beach. reinforced concrete pads, and they're landing on reinforced concrete pads. Well, they're landing in reinforced concrete pads.
Which is fair. But I would like to point out that NASA did do testing back in the 60s. Sadly, the YouTube video specifically of the testing has since been either unlisted, deleted, something or other. Point is, they did do testing with the various landing pads, different landing angles, and as long as the landing base is wide enough, the testing did show that they could safely dig into it. And as my slideshow will even show, they actually do have the lunar surface isn't as dusty as it's made out to be. For example, let's go with this one.
Word what you just said there, because you're talking about a wide-based vehicle being able to settle into the regolith, right? This is not a wide-based vehicle. This is a cigar tube.
Which it's a cigar tube, but we do have some images that show that it does have at least the more recent photos do show that it has wider legs. No. It's not as thin as
photos. Yeah. I have photos. You have CGI, like the one that's up on the screen right now. That's not real.
But there's nothing stopping it from being real. I mean, I'm not trying to excuse it, but there's nothing stopping that.
Right now, looking at that photo, that those legs have nowhere to fold into. Why? Because that's where the engines are.
They could just simply extend backwards. They could be telescopic. I mean, that's how the Falcon 9 works, is that the Falcon 9 has telescopic landing legs, is that when it folds back, it extends into itself.
It's like, you got the legs coming out of there. Great. You know what else I've seen coming out of there? Giant solar panels.
Well, we obviously can see the solar panels have been moved to the top.
That one.
This is the most recent. That's why I specifically chose this image, is that because it's the most recent official.
6 feet off of the regolith, something like that. Open up those vacuum raptors, and what's going to happen to them? They're going to get chewed to shit.
Which is another fair issue. Again, they have to prove that viable. However, that's
pretty much our point. They got to start proving things viable before we start believing any of it. There's a lot of people out there, they need this to happen. They need to believe in something. They want to be part of the next lunar landing generation, because not much has happened in space during our lifetime other than on the ISS. There hasn't been a whole lot for people to get excited about. They need something to get excited about, so they get excited about this. This isn't real. In order for that vehicle to get to where it is on that surface, they have to still create the refilling system.
Which
that is imaginary and on the drawing board.
Although it needs to be pointed out that although this is not SpaceX, United Launch Alliance has taken ground testing to prove that it is possible with their equipment. So it's obviously not too hypothetical for SpaceX to also develop that, especially as we see more tests. Although with hypergolics, not with cryogenics of methalox, we are seeing tests of satellites being refueled in orbits.
Not to the tune of 1,200 tons.
Yes, and that is, yes, and somebody else is mentioning that they have landing engines further up, but I will consent that we aren't entirely certain with this exact render if those engines are still doing that. There are 3 circles that seem to indicate that there are engines higher up, but we don't have, I keep it 50-50 if it's actually going to be higher up.
They plan on landing this thing with. See them having enough energy to get it back off of the surface. Back to the point where they can light up the other ones.
Yeah, but if they have just regular vacuum engines above the fuel tanks, they could use pumps to move the fuel vertically, especially in a zero gravity environment.
But again, looking at that, the CGI, you don't have any idea what the layout of that vehicle is. You don't know what the floor plan is. You don't know where the header tank is. Apparently, if there's a header tank that locks up on a nose cone, that's how it's planning on docking with Gateway. Well, you can't have it both ways.
Well, there also have been conceptions that
leading any further in any of these machines. whether it's this, whether it's the tanker, whether it's the garbage collector scow that he wanted to make it a couple of months ago, whether it's the one going to Mars. We need to start seeing floor plans, not artist renderings, not artist concepts, actual floor plans. And that way we can start dissecting and say, you know what, you've got a life support system here, because they don't have a life support system suitable for a craft this big. You know, they got it for Crew Dragon, that's not going to scale up. Nothing's going to scale up from Dragon to Starship.
What if they were to, here's a question, what if they were to redesign Dragon? Since technically it started with the propulsive landing mechanism, if they were to extend, say, replace the trunk with a fuel tank and legs, what would be the prevention there?
I'm not following the question.
I'm just hypothetical. If they were to modify Dragon 2, replace the trunk with a fuel tank, since it was already designed to land on Earth, if you remember, what would stop it from them from using that?
Dragons aren't, the Crew Dragons land in the water.
But they were proposed to use, and they even did hover tests. So it does have a sufficient TWR in the ability.
Then we're dealing with regolith and dust again. Dust is a problem on
which, dust is only significant with the higher thrust. You know, with the lower thrust of...
The only way you test that is to start hovering over talcum powder or a bed of flour or something like that. Something with the same texture as what you're dealing with on the moon. You're going to wind up with pockets of dust. In those pockets of dust, you're going to probably have, you know, more solid bedrock. If you blast away all the dust and you're left with uneven bedrock, thing goes over.
Yeah, just like I was saying, though, with the lower thrust, you end up with an issue where you don't need to fire the engine all the way to contact, because that was the method with the lunar module, is that they could actually cut the engine up to 3 seconds early to prevent dust blowback into the engines.
Makes sense, but that's not what they're planning.
Which is fair, but if they were to, say, fire the engines, they could, as long as they had some sort of a slider engine, they could do that. If they cut the engines 2 seconds early, I've done the math, it's only like 30 mile an hour impact speed, which is probably more akin to a Falcon 9 impact.
When it's touched down on a barge.
Yes, and that's, again, that's roughly what we see with the Falcon 9, is that the impact speeds are, again, it's a minor car crash, a very minor car crash, which the crush cores we see on Falcon 9 are built to handle. So I'm just, like I said, I did the math using, again, for the HLS example, I ran that math with the moon's gravity specifically, so I already accounted for that. And before you ask,
because you should be able to get a dragon head towards the moon without 14 refilling stops.
And to that, again, I can't really argue that, seeing as we are looking. I've heard numbers ranging from 7 to 8 to 16, so that is a fair point. But at the same time, right now, almost as far as I'm aware of, all 3 landers require some form of refueling.
On this, we assumed that by the time the Starship upper stage got into orbit, that it had only gone through half of the fuel that they had on board, half of the propellant. So we said, I need to have 6 tankers go up there to refill everything. People lost their minds. And now, Musk and the GAO, from their report on it, is going to be up to 14. So go ahead and lose your minds. Numbers are numbers. What normally happens when we're doing an episode, we normally guess on the conservative side of the numbers for the most part. And so, you know, people are talking about it, and the conservative numbers that we're using are actually a lot more drastic when people are get more sources.
So here's something I'm seeing is. You finish.
It's pretty much done.
Okay. Well, just the one question is: are you arguing that Starship couldn't reach orbit in its current configuration? Is, you know, just it couldn't get there at all right now?
now, could they launch today and get into orbit? No.
Well, with the current design, let me rephrase that. With SN20 and Booster 4, once they get proper engines installed, could that vehicle enter a full orbit?
It's not going to get off the pad the way that it is right now. And for that is, even if it was ready to go up, even if the ship itself was perfect, which nobody here is agreeing to, you need a deluge system. The deluge system needs a desalinization plant. Desalinization plant needs a power plant. Power plant needs a gas line to Boca Chica, the pipeline. You can't get that off of the pad without a deluge system. The vibrations coming back off of the pad will rip the ass out of it.
Well, we'll certainly see that since they have a static fire coming within the next month, and I assume that they're not going to. I mean, we have, like you said, we only can go with assumptions that.
Excited about those static fires? They're farts. They're not. They don't prove anything. They prove the engines ignite and shut off. They don't prove any sort of damage load on reinforced pad. They shut them off before any of that. In fact, sometimes they don't even shut them off quick enough. How many Raptors have they had to replace after rocks and bits got blasted up into it and they shattered the holes on them?
And I'm hearing others are mentioning that they could use tankers to bring in water. So
you can try it.
I mean, there's nothing stopping such a method.
Do you see a water tower there big enough to handle that type of load? Do you understand the type of deluge system that they have at Kennedy? There's no structure at that site big enough to hold that amount of water.
Most of the water that comes from Kennedy is pumped in straight from the ocean.
It'd be desalinized.
Not all of it. Especially the emergency water pumps that they use come from just straight ocean tanks.
If you actually want, if you're in an emergency system, that's a little bit different because you need anything at your disposal to cease the emergency. However, if you want no damage being done by fired up salt on your equipment, you need to go with fresh water.
Well, I am hearing that they have a GSC tank specifically for water now. Again, I don't follow that, so I'm obviously having to rely on chat for that one.
Because here's the deal, okay? If that system works, like all these guys are saying, if that system's going to work, then all the stuff that they have in their DPEA is unnecessary. They don't need the plant. They don't need the desalinization plant. They don't need the deluge system. They don't need the power plant, the 250 megawatt power plant, and they don't need the gas pipeline to power that plant to desalinize the water to, they're kind of shooting themselves in their own head here because that system works. You don't need any of the shit that's in the PEA.
So, having addressed the water issue, they have fully fueled these vehicles before. So, what would be the next issue to prevent this stack from working?
Sorry, go again.
Having discussed that, with them being able to truck in water, what would be the next issue to prevent SN20 from flying? Since we've already mentioned that, they can manage the vibrations thanks to the water, so it would be the next issue.
That's a good question. Ted, for most of the episodes that we've done, we've assumed that this thing could get to orbit. We figured that before Musk revealed this thing looked like, that he has some sort of plan in place to actually get it to orbit. And most of what the episodes that we've done have been into after they're in orbit. That's up there, can it do what Musk and SpaceX and Shotwell say it can? And no, it can't. It's the same thing as the point-to-point and the Army delivery system, and all these other CGI movies that they put out.
Which is those are trust me. When it comes to point-to-point, you do not need to be the most vocal person. That is a very flawed concept. But sticking at least to its more practical uses of, say, getting man to the moon. Currently, they, regardless of position, it is the most developed lander, as much as I don't want to say as much, but Blue Origin has far less to show for it. You speak of floor plans. They don't have floor plans. I mean, they have a rough shape, but nothing else.
Most kinetics Dynetics and Blue Origin provided mock-ups to NASA for astronauts to walk in, to go through. I mean, there were plywood mock-ups, whatever, but they had a floor plan, they had a design. It was delivered to NASA, and the astronauts who were supposed to be on the missions, they were allowed to walk in it and sit in it and play around with it and say, this control panel is a little out of reach, and move it over here. I mean, it was delivered a vision of what it was that they were trying to build. And SpaceX didn't do that. They're the only ones who didn't do that. So you knew how big the Blue Origin was. You could walk in it, you could try to get around in it. If you were banging your head on something, then you made a note of it so that you know this pipe is in the wrong spot or whatever. That was the idea behind delivering these mock-ups. We don't have that.
But but isn't just an internal mock-up a lower priority than actually having, say, working engines, working fuel tanks? Because, for example, looking historically, we had the lunar module before the lunar module had a fully built interior. Flying on Apollo 5, it was not fully completed, but it had working engines, it had working ascent stage, working fuel tanks. So I can't see where you're coming from, but ultimately, historically, with the only other lunar lander we've actually used, it came in the same method. It came with working electrical systems, working propulsion, then the internals came later, and it also underwent many changes similar to what we're seeing here.
Because the guys in the Apollo program kept shuffling stuff around. They kept going into their simulators and saying, this is working, that's not working. Right? The whole thing from the right stuff about them wanting a window. The engineers weren't going to do that. That was up to the astronauts to tell them, no, put in a freaking window.
But can we say that the astronauts aren't having a word with it? I mean, I haven't seen anything that says that astronauts or NASA, I've never seen them say anything that SpaceX's interiors are being unrealistic or unworkable. It has been very quiet, but nothing that says that they haven't been responsive.
Again, how are they supposed to respond to something they don't have? They don't have a mock-up to go through. They don't have floor plans to, if Musk had a floor plan for this, you can bet your ass it would be out all over Twitter. He doesn't keep anything that close to his vest, right? He wants everybody to see what he's doing as he's doing it. The problem is, I don't think he's doing enough. People will take issue with that, and I don't care. Any of these debates are going to get settled. Got to start releasing something, and just CGIs. He's got to start releasing a floor plan that we can start dissecting. He's got to start releasing systems. He's got to get people in closed systems, working in closed quarters that are completely sealed with 100% recyclable air, water, waste, whatever. That's not being done. And the first mission, Deer Moon, is not going to be flown by astronauts. Who's training to fly what, where, and how? X doesn't have any astronauts.
They do have some facilities. They have, as you mentioned earlier, they have that that solar panel plant you mentioned. So I mean, they have some in-house facilities. Not to mention, they can take a lot of their experience from Dragon 2. It's undersized, but by modifying or increasing the number of, say, air filters or oxygen production cylinders, oxygen generators, I should say, they could scale it up. And even if they don't fill up the entire space of Starship, they could basically just put a large Dragon-sized cabin at the nose. And as other people have mentioned, the fuel header tank in the nose is no longer necessary in an HLS design because that's only for the flip.
Is there a question pending?
I was just more explaining that, you mentioned that they need to prove systems, but they do have solar panels. I'm just mentioning that they have solar panels, they have fuel tanks, engines. They can lift a lot of the technology developed for.
Look at the solar panels that they got on that CGI that you had where it was landed on the moon.
Whoops.
We're going to be only one set of those panels is going to be pointed directly at the sun. Everything else is going to be off angle. Half of them are going to be dark. So,
but it would also provide better coverage.
Those panels, that array, and they compare it to what the ISS has for their solar panels and their cooling systems, their radiators as well, and none of that's on there, right? That of solar panels isn't going to be enough to power that if the ISS requires what it does with all the arrays that they've got.
But the ISS is also running heavy experiments. I mean, it's not entirely dedicated just to life support.
Sorry, I cut you off or you cut me off? I'm not sure which one.
Well, if I cut you off, I didn't mean to. I thought there was a pause. But like I was saying, I was just iterating that. You mentioned this. You mentioned the solar panels on the ISS, but there are two facets. They could use fuel cells, but on top of that, the ISS uses a lot of that power for science experiments, stuff like the super cooled experiment where they tried to super chill things as close to absolute zero. That all comes in the solar panels. But on top of that,
what do you think they're going to be doing on the moon?
A lot of the experiments will probably be using things like.
How many example do you think it's going to take to run that crane up and down?
Well, I can depending on the motor, you can actually make it quite light. I can make a motor that can lift a couple hundred pounds, probably a couple thousand pounds off of a couple of car batteries. So I mean, that's motors. Motors are very energy efficient. If you can, if you know what you're doing, you can make them very energy efficient. Plus, I would like just to point out something that you may have missed is that being at the South Pole, the sun will also end up.
I'm ask a favor here.
Say again.
Astro Kiwi. Astro Kiwi. Got go.
Isn't the radiator on the?
Put him for Twitch. This is over. Tired of looking at him.
I'm leaving the chat alone. But what I was just saying is I'm not.
Then we're done.
What?
Yeah. Boot him or I'm done. Looking at him.
Let the chat decide that one because okay, apparently he's leaving, so whatever. Anyway, like I was saying, being on the South Pole, the one thing to include is that the moon or the sun will oscillate around Starship, effectively meaning that with its circular design, it will the sun will cover all those solar panels over time, especially if it stays there for the month that it's planned to.
Not at the same time. That's what you're missing.
Which is fair, but at the same time, they could supplement power with alternative measures, again, like fuel cells.
Let's see the diagrams. Let's see where they fit into the ship. Let's see how big they are. What type of
again, if they were to go with a fat Dragon 2 size, they would leave them plenty of space too. And again, hypothetical, but it's not. It's a big fact of it's also not impossible.
Again, you're dealing with hypotheticals. You're dealing with maybes. You're making excuses for SpaceX. You need that.
Well, it's not really excuses. I mean, this falls into the same problem of the other two landers because although they have big solar panels, is that enough? Or are we just making hypothetical excuses to say those solar panels are big enough?
We're basing the comparison against the ISS. The ISS doesn't have anything up there that it doesn't absolutely need. Some that might be redundant, whatever. But they're not bringing up at the cost per pound that it is to get stuff into orbit. They're not bringing up a whole bunch of stuff they don't need. So they obviously need that many solar panels. They need that many radiator panels. They need what they've got. They need what they've got, and this is the same internal volume, and this is also going to be doing work and doing experiments and all the rest of it. Then they need to have a similar size solar panel array. Pretty basic.
But then we can obviously put this against, give me a second, the National Team lander, which doesn't even have any solar panels if we observe. Come on now. There. Yeah, it doesn't even have solar panels. It's entirely, it's just the lander. Again, I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying this is a...
at how big that is compared to how big Starship is.
It's going to be handling the same crew. I mean, so if one works, why doesn't it work?
You're looking at look at what you've got on the screen. You compare that to the size of the Starship. The power requirements of these are not going to be identical.
It's the same crew. I mean, same crew. The lights, maybe you might have a few more lights, which is what, 2 or 3 more watts, but that's the mission, especially Artemis 5 to say is 7.
Just keeping the lights on, you're looking at a completely different paradigm.
It depends on your lights, but you could easily cover them.
So the people that wear their suits on the inside, completely different. If you're talking about the viability of fuel cells for Starship and making up for the difference in the power requirements there, because not all those panels are going to be bathed in sunlight. And this, if you took those same fuel cells and put them in there, then yeah, I mean, if it's half the size, then the half that's being covered with the fuel cells or the batteries or whatever, you're looking at a tit for tat. You don't need the solar panels, right? Ideally, that should have solar panels. Maybe that, I don't know, I can't tell what's on the back side of there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find an image of the back side.
On the front side of it.
So it is just to prove that that solar panels could be an overcome issue, is that, especially going back in history, I mean, the lunar module wasn't stopped by a lack of solar panels. It used a fixed power supply with the fuel cells on board and batteries.
Apollo didn't go to the moon with the idea of colonizing it, to bring industry there, that kind of stuff.
Which is fair, but here's the thing. Right now for Artemis, Artemis, I'm sorry to cut you off. I apologize, but for Artemis, we're not looking for colonize. We're just looking for a month, 2-month stays, But for colonizing, in the cislunar economy NASA claims, that already exists. That is a past tense, because with CLIPS and this lunar landing program and everything else, it already exists. It's just not flying yet. But but as to again, just speaking to if these landers could work, Lockheed, the national team was only slated for what, a couple of weeks, which is already longer than Apollo, but it's, no one's talking about colonization or anything right now except for Musk, which I don't take seriously.
And when it comes right down to it, that's kind of the whole premise here, is that we've stopped taking anything he's saying seriously.
Which is, even if we disregard Elon Musk, there's still SpaceX Official, which is a company of thousands and millions of very capable people.
The lady in charge there, Lynn Shotwell, she's just become she had some credibility when she went there. Her husband works for JPL. He's got obviously some history with the space race as well, but she lost all credibility when she started pushing point to point. Just that, for her to go to that TED Talk and tell the host, what she did about this being a residual capability of an imaginary machine, it just turned me right up. Give me about 10 seconds. I'm just going to go grab a glass of water here.
Okay, go ahead. It's alright, Sci-Fi. How's it for you?
Alright, back.
Okay, I was just talking to chat. So yeah. Somebody had just posted a picture of the radiators on the...
So those radiators are the white on the back of the national team?
No, of the lunar module is what they posted. Or, what's that file? Oh, on the CSM, never mind. And I think they just cited that because they just wanted to point out that radiators can fit easily on a tube. So, and so we've already covered the viability of SN20 and that it's as I understand it, you're saying if they can get it off the ground, that it could reach orbit, aside from other issues, just that it could push itself to there, assuming they could pump the water, assuming they have power and all that.
The way that it is right now, and we brought this to our attention here yesterday, what release mechanism do they have between Super Heavy and Starship? They don't seem to, judging from that picture that they had, that's kind of like the black and white New York guys working on top of a skyscraper. That's, I think, what they were trying to elicit there.
Yeah.
Fitting when they were stacking it. I don't see any interlock mechanisms there. I don't see any electric motors to push it away from Super Heavy after it gets released. They're just pushing this thing, pushing it up, and they're not connected in properly, and they don't have the ability to push off. Oh, it won't reach orbit.
Well, it is possible what they could do is they could just exhaust gas, high pressure gas from the Raptor engines, because that could, with large enough throats and the high amount of gas being pushed, could act as a low thrust ullage motor that would not only push the fuel but also provide that thrust that you're mentioning to provide the separation for the safe ignition of the engines.
Interesting to see.
Yes, because that's a lot of engines do that, and if you go back and look at something like the RS-25, it's already pumping out gas long before the engines actually ignite. It's why they have the sparklers around the engines, because there's already gas not only just leaking from the fuel tanks, but actually actively being pumped out of the engines to keep the fuel flow moving and to prevent gas locks and other things related. So. And yes, no name, it is pushed out by a piston, to answer your question.
Pistons aren't on the Starship or Super Heavy, right?
Say again, sorry.
I'm just confirming that those pistons aren't part of the Starship.
No, and it's quite clear because Falcon 9 has quite a big piston to make that work, to basically shoot the upper stage. According to URL 86, they say they're going to sling the upper stage. No, I don't know what that entails. So, I will be quite curious to see how that works.
Describe sling.
Yeah. I'm guessing what they're talking about is maybe by generating a rotation, because if you do create separation, that the outward centrifugal force will pull it apart. Though I do think that's a bit of a waste of fuel, since you'll obviously have to be firing your RCS thrusters to do that, but it's radial separation. Okay. Apparently similar to Starlink, so again, if it can work, great. If not, well, like I said, I do think there are alternatives. It's not a complete game ender. See the connection points here. Oh, okay, yeah. They do actually make a fair point on this one. Where is it? Website. Yeah. It's kind of hard to see, but those little tabs, those are the connection points. I see what they're talking about now.
Points are just guides to get it into place.
According to them, again, they say it's those are the things holding it in. The rotation will be induced via engine gimbal. Okay, I see.
It happens. I guess eventually, they'll give it a shot if they ever get the launch license.
Yeah.
But,
which, if I remember correctly, is getting close to the end of those issues, or at least those surveys and everything. Yeah, good. Make that go away.
They're at the end of their public input sessions. That ended yesterday, I think. But now they started. I mean, they haven't even published the transcripts from those things yet. And that's 6 hours of transcripts, so that people can read through them and make comments on them. And a lot of people are thinking that this process is all over. I don't think it is. From the lawyers and whatnot that have contacted the channel, Sounds to me that if the FAA doesn't issue an EIS, that they'll be sued to issue an EIS.
Curious.
I'll just
Okay.
blog for more.
All right, and I actually somebody gave me this idea. Let's assume, you know, worst comes to worst, Starship does detonate on the pad. What will be your thoughts at that moment?
The thoughts at that moment?
Yes.
The facility's gone.
Okay.
What we've done before in 2, maybe 3 episodes now, we've likened it to the N-15L explosion. The Soviet N-1 had half the propellants on board that the Starship is due to if it's a full stack. And the explosion on that consumed only 15% of the propellant because of the way that it was spherical. The cylinders were mounted inside the chain there. There was like 8 different propellant cylinders, 4 for LOX and 4 for RP1. So the RP1, the LOX, they didn't get a chance to combine. If they had, it was going to be worse. As it was a 15% detonation, and the kilotons on it estimated from 1 to 7. So if you take it out of 1 and you count that as a 15%, that's 1/7. You double it, it's 14. So at the low end, if all the propellants in the machine were to go at the same time, you're looking at 14 kilotons. This comparison math with an historical precedent.
But the N1, if I remember correctly, was either hypergolic or used Keralox, not cryogenic methalox.
But you take a look at the way that all the Starships have exploded to date, there was no delay. And in a single frame of video, you go from seeing the ship to seeing a fireball. There's no progression of events. You go from nothing to boom. And same thing, you know, it happened with SN4, happened with SN10. At least with 10, you had an opportunity to see the thing on the ground before it blew up. But it's a single frame, right? So your 1/24th or 1/60th of a second, or whatever your frame rate is a fraction of a second from zero to fireball.
But do we know what the actual combustion, I can't remember the exact term, but there is a term for basically the speed of combustion of a fuel. Do we actually know what that is for methane? See if I can figure that out.
I think it's 1,500 meters per second.
Versus methalox. You know, let's see if Chad can find that out, save me some time. But, yeah. Yeah, it all depends since...
remember correctly from the episode, anything from any type of fuel like that has, what do you call it, hydrocarbon fuels, have the same detonation velocity, and I think it's 1,500 meters per second.
Okay.
That would need a citation. I'd have to go back and watch the episode again.
Oh, calm down, you. Here's another interesting question for you, since this is something I only learned a while back. Since we're so used to Falcon 9, what are your thoughts on the grid fins? Those massive car-side grid fins, since they're actually going to launch stuck out.
Okay, so that's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, that I would admit that was new to even to me.
Wouldn't have to on it right now, but yeah, anything that cuts down the aerodynamicity of the vehicle can't be good.
Sci-fi, what do you mean 11.6 to 14? Is that the... Oh, I think I get what you're saying. And which is for which? Yeah. Griffins help sticking out, help raising the center of aerodynamic mass.
You take a look at the detonation velocity of what happened in Beirut. You compare that to the propellant, and the propellant goes up quicker. Of course, we know what happened in Beirut.
There are other rockets. Yes, other rockets like Soyuz. Soyuz is probably the best example of one with grid fins sticking out, and the N1. A lot of Russian rockets. Go away. So, it will be interesting to see how that works out, but personally I just think that that's a lot of wasted efficiency.
want the thing to be as streamlined as possible going up, which kind of made the, like, if you take a look at the Saturn V, whatever, and they're pretty much straight up and down. And you take a look at the Soviet N1, and that was like a really tall triangle, and it just seemed to have a lot of places for it to catch air, especially with the lattice that held its stages together.
Yeah, but at the same time, you mean you don't need to have aerodynamic surfaces to make a rocket work. Even the Saturn V could have very easily gotten away without those fins at the base that we see.
Put a big enough motor on the bottom of a sea can, you can get it off the ground.
True. All right, and so we've covered SN20 and we've covered HLS. Now, I remember you mentioning that, mentioning Dear Moon, so let's go ahead and go with that. Do you think they're going to launch crew on Dear Moon, specifically launching crew with Starship, or do you think they're going to use an alternative?
The question is, does Dear Moon require a crew, or is it just going to be automated? Is that what you're going with?
Let me elaborate. That may have been vague. Assuming Dear Moon continues with Starship, do you assume that they will launch the crew in the same Starship they will be flying on, or will they use, say, Dragon to get to Dear Moon? To do Dear Moon, sorry.
Launch Dragon on a Heavy and be done with it.
They could, but it is contracted to be Starship. So what would your thoughts on Dragon docking to Starship doing the moon and coming back?
You're introducing just more points of failure into that system by doing it that way. Okay, whatever craft lifts off the ground, I think this answers your question. Whatever craft lifts off the ground will be whatever tries to go to the moon with it. Dragon, as I'm aware, won't require refueling to actually pull that off, whereas Starship will, not only in LEO but also in geostationary transfer. I don't know if you're familiar with the guy. There's a guy called the Pressure Fed Astronaut. He does a great episode on what it's going to take to refuel Starship to get it out of Earth's orbit. You're talking months. It's not going to be a couple of quick taps on while it's in LEO. It's going to be in LEO, refueled, burn it out to a higher altitude orbit, and have to refuel again before it can burn out to go to either the moon or Mars. It's actually a really good episode.
Okay. Yeah, as somebody else pointed out, is that docking to Starship back and forth you're right, it does add quite a bit of issues, but as somebody else mentioned, it's no more than what we see with, say, an ISS mission where you're docking and undocking.
I don't see the comparison there. You're nowhere near, even the ISS is at 550 kilometers. Is it that high?
It varies. It rises and falls.
I mean, you're that far away from Earth when it comes right down to it. You're a day's car drive, but you're going up. That's it.
But I mean, if that's where the Starship is, and then it fires its engine, I mean, for a free return trajectory, I think I've heard about half. You can get away with maybe 4.
That all depends on how much fuel or propellant it has left in it. It gets into its orbit. Right?
But if
nobody knows. Yes, it would still have half, but people seem to think that it's going to be damn near empty by the time it gets into LEO.
But what if they were to refuel it? Basically, they put it there, refuel it, then they launch crew. Then they put crew on it.
So with what from where?
They could launch
orbit. Don't buy that either. Like there's another company out there called Orbital Assembly, which is just they're a joke. We did 5 episodes on them. And they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna have these gas stations in orbit. No, you're fucking not. That's not gonna happen. Because you gotta spend 11 or 1,200 tons to get 100 tons to this depot. and land and go back and forth and just run it like a train. But you're spending far more than you're delivering, and what you deliver to orbit's going to boil off anyway. So that seems, I can't see through that even. Like orbital assembly, if you haven't seen those episodes after we're done here, because I know you said you haven't seen a whole lot, but check those ones out, because people are throwing money at them, and it's a garbage idea.
Yeah, and others are mentioning, but my thing is that even the Centaur 5 is going to be trying to do something similar, and Methalox is far more stable than the Hydrolox that ULA is going to be trying to work with.
I mean, good luck to everybody who's going to give this a try.
Yeah, and like I said, ULA has already taken steps. They've done those tests. I was actually reasonably surprised when I looked into it for my data sheet. I looked into it, and they've done 3 or 4 different equipment tests, which would enable them to pretty quickly step into that once they get Vulcan fully up and running.
We're just seeing that then.
Yeah, somebody mentions that ULA was shut down.
That's something that people, especially the ones following along in the chat here, need to realize. We're not anti-space. We're not anti-exploration. Most of us, grew up watching nothing but sci-fi movies. It gets to a point where you're being force-fed so much mainstream media nonsense that you have to start questioning it. Once you start questioning it, you start looking at the numbers. You don't have to run complicated numbers to see where a lot of these ideas fall apart.
Yeah, that actually reminds me, you had a question for me. So, you actually had a question before we even started this. Back when I first asked you if you would participate, if you remember that.
Trying to figure out where it was that you kind of sat in on this. So, obviously taking a look down to the stream chat here, walking into a Viper's pen, and I wanted to know. And
like I said, I've been paying kind of half attention. I've been trying to humor the relevant questions, put it politely.
No, you've done a good job with the moderation, no 2 ways about it. But the question that we've got is, you said that you had criticisms of Starship yourself, that you weren't, 100% getting snowed over. So what criticisms do you have?
Well, to be fair, you've already said quite a few. You point to point, like I said, that is no. Although I will say the following as far as point to point. Do I think a rocket point to point will ever work out? Probably not. Do I believe that SpaceX will attempt it? I do believe they will. It will not work. However, I do fully believe that the work they will do will usher in and will lay the groundwork for other companies and their vehicles to improve and make viable those plans and concepts. Because if, for example, something smaller like Electron, this is where something small like Electron, that would work. You could say airdrop, have it fall down with a parachute and be recovered by a group, and you only need like a car to carry it, as opposed to something like Starship, which is practically like a falling ICBM bomb, when as far as point to point. So I can definitely, though, that's one of my criticisms, is I don't think it'll work.
The point ones. Episode 8, we addressed Shotwell's TED Talk. And forget what other episode number it was, like 15 or 16, something like that. We took on the Army delivery system and compared it to what it would actually, the amount of time it would take for that system, assuming it would work at all.
Yeah, personally, and that's the thing, is I see if they tried militarizing it, it would be a very interesting situation between 1 of 2 possibilities. Possibility 1 is that other enemy nations, China, Russia, etc., they develop their own starships specifically to combat and try to, match the U.S. Or, in my opinion, more likely, because it's infinitely cheaper, we just see them develop a low altitude anti-satellite missile, because that would be far easier. Because Starship, as we already have the numbers, the TWR is so insanely slow. I'll get to that. The TWR is so insanely slow that anything, even an aircraft, could shoot it down during launch because it is so slow. And if it's moving military hardware, it automatically becomes a military target.
Well, and with ITAR, I mean, you are not allowed to just launch and land in rocket technology in any country, right? Only that, I mean, you've got, say that there's right now, perfect example, you've got a volcano going off in the Canary Islands, right? It's been going off for a month and a half. Let's say that that thing goes full Krakatoa and they need rescue supplies and blah, blah, blah at the north end of that island. You're going to send something like this into that area, you're adding another hazard. You won't have any of the logistics that it requires, right? Not going to be able to take off again. None of it makes any sense. Like they come up with these things and they just don't make sense. But most people don't just take it at face value because it's in front of them and it's flashy and it's a CGI movie that looks cool, right? And that sucks them in. And it just turns off their brain. Why that happens, history, right? I don't know if it's scientific illiteracy. I don't know if it's a lack of critical thinking. You know, but once you start looking at the logistics behind what it would take to look up the rocket and where the rocket's got to be in relation to the munitions hangar, and the hangar needs to be outfitted and whatnot, and then you got to get it all the way up 100 feet in the air one way or another so you can load and stack this stuff in such a way that none of it can move around even a centimeter. Otherwise, you're going to throw off the weight of the vehicle. You've got to do your retro flip burn to get the butt down at the other end. That's a hazard. You need a clear spot that's level. No saying that you're going to be able to find that. Like, you add up all the stuff. It just comes across as bullshit.
Admittedly, there are quite a few issues, but that's ultimately where it comes back to what I was saying, that I don't think Starship is the vehicle to do that job. However, I do believe that any vertical, any rocket can do that. Yeah.
Rockets are they're the wrong mode. One of the things that we covered in the Army point, the logistics and deliveries. We got enough American air bases around the world are equipped with hangars full of materials that can launch a C5. You can drive your forklifts right up to it or right into it and drop it, strap it, done. Plus, you can push that material out the back end of it. It's hilarious. We actually had people saying, "Oh, you could do the same thing with Starship. You could push this stuff out and it would parachute down." Push out means that munitions on pallets, rocket speed.
Yeah, that again, there are quite you constantly mention things like hypotheticals, and I agree there are a huge amount of hypotheticals, but and you do state that Elon Musk opens his mouth to everything, but we are aware there is a lot that isn't currently known, simply because it isn't available. For example, I don't know the full specs on Raptor 2, and I say that because I have a data sheet. I am trying my hardest to gather all of this data. Everything all that information, I'm trying to put into one place, and even I can't find it.
Over a year passed when Musk said he was going to release the floor plans for Starship. He said he was going to do that last October, and obviously that hasn't happened. So you're operating in the dark. We're operating on what is off their web page, out of their users manuals, off of press releases, that kind of thing. Whether it's the dimensions or it doesn't matter. At this point, you've got is a vehicle that for the time being is parked in Boca Chica. It's stacked, it's unstacked, it's licensed, it's not licensed. The people who are in support of it don't have a solid reason to grant the license, because the license isn't to do with your fondness for space travel or making human life multiplanetary or whatever, right? Thankfully, we're on the growing side of the argument, and that's pretty apparent because the channel just keeps growing hand over fist. It's a hell of a lot bigger than we ever thought it would be. This used to be, when we first started out, it was just going to be a platform where we were having a debate. We could send somebody to a video, so we didn't have to have that debate 8 times a day. And here we are, a half later, and what we've put out so far is just about ready to turn into a full-time job for us.
Yeah, and that's that's the big interesting thing with YouTube, especially right now, is that if you have something that people want to watch, that you can even surprisingly um, get away with it, make that something you can actually run with, and um, like you said, if you make a living out of it.
Yeah, it's a little surprising. Like when we first started off, we only had 3 episodes, and we released them all within, I don't know, a couple of days of each other, I guess. And the response to it was cool. The amount of people that came to check it out and shared it and all the rest of it. We don't do any advertising. We weren't on Twitter or anything even at that time. And it was organic, right? People want to see out of what Musk is them that. He just has no idea how to make that happen, right? All of his colonization on Mars plans, they're no more real than they were when people first started thinking about it in the 50s and the 60s. You don't have the haves. You don't have the greenhouse technology. You don't have the recovery systems. You don't have the simplest thing. Musk had in situ fuel production methods. Are they running on Earth? I don't think they are, because he's got that $100 million carbon capture prize, which is basically supposed to make that tech for him the same way that he tried to do with the university students with Hyperloop. I don't know how to do it, so I'm going to hype up a competition, and we'll see who can make it for me, and then I'll just take their tech and we'll run with that. And it's the same thing with the carbon capture. He doesn't know how to make fuel on Mars. Not with what they've got there, not with the technology they've got, not with the volume that they require. Pretty simple. Start looking at it that way, and none of it adds up.
Well, since we're wanting to wrap this up around 5 o'clock, if that's okay with you, at about 30 minutes. So,
That's an hour and a half already.
Yeah, really, it's gone by pretty quick. Just noticed that looking at literally an hour and 23 minutes. So, if it's okay with you, there are select comments I would like to maybe ask, since they intrigue me to see what your answer is, if that makes sense. Again, I'm not trying to throw unfair questions, but again, there are questions I would like to have answers to, if that makes sense.
Uh-oh. Dogs are going to go nuts here shortly.
Oh.
I told you, keep that mute button handy in case they start howling.
I definitely will. So yeah, if you're okay with that, my first question is, somebody asks how SpaceX is wasting taxpayers' money when Boeing is doing quite the same with Starliner.
Because one of them is wasting money doesn't excuse the other.
Okay.
There's a lot of this projection. People like to, but what about, right? The what aboutism in this category is just off the charts. Well, forgivable for SpaceX to be wasting money? No, but it's also not. You apply the same metric to Boeing, right, or to whoever. But just because one of them does it doesn't excuse the other one.
Here's another question, since we're talking about issues relating to launch. What are your thoughts on SLS? Seeing as, both of these vehicles are finally reaching their conclusion right about the same time.
What do we think about the machine, or what do we think about its chances at launch?
Chance to launch, the machine, the program. Just, what do you think about SLS as, as a whole, its development, its progress, what it's offering, everything else?
Took far too long. Now that it's built, they're just working out the final bugs, hopefully. Everything else is dependent. Even HLS from a SpaceX perspective is going to be reliant on that. So it better work. And a lot of money on it, but the thing's built. It's stacked up as far as I'm aware. So it's just waiting. isn't something that I'm 100% familiar with, but it seems to me that they had some sort of valve issue that needed to be corrected, and then they're looking at spring of 22. Is that right?
The valve issue was actually rather, if I remember correctly, that was in the green run last year, so it wasn't internal. It was rather the test stand, so it wasn't actually the vehicle. And currently, the launch date is February 12th of next year.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're actually right now we're expecting the next major event is once they get everything, all the arms and everything reattached. The next major event is they'll roll it out to the pad to wet dress rehearsal it.
I mean, wishing it the best of luck, because there's more than one system that's kind of hanging in the balance on that one.
Which is true, because even if you know,
what we've been talking about.
Exactly. Even if NASA decides to say change their mind, go to another, go to national team, it's still the same problem. If you can choose to answer this one or not, but someone's bringing up that you mentioned Blue Origin lander returning to Earth.
That was a misprint. That was going into the conversation, not completely 100% aware. I personally, because I'm more focused on the floor plans and whatnot of Starship. That's kind of where my focus is. But yeah, under the impression that what launched from the moon was going to be what landed back at Earth, like Apollo, was a misconception.
Okay, which, to be fair with Apollo, the program is actually very similar to Apollo as far as the not the architecture, but as far as what's you have the lander, which goes and stays at the moon, and then you have the capsule, which returns right now. But I understand that, and I will give credit, though some people might not understand it, but just be forewarned, everybody, that sometimes we say things that we don't know fully understand. We may not know everything we're talking about, but it doesn't mean that we're not trying to make a bad call. It's just sometimes we don't know everything. If that makes sense.
I don't know what your background is, but nobody here is a rocket scientist. We just literally approach this from common sense thinking, right? And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we get it wrong. But the fact is, if we make 10 points about Starship and get one of them wrong, and people die.
Exactly. Which is why as much as one thing you might, I would like to at least explain is you talk about all my criticisms. The one thing I am okay with is in regards to the SLS, NASA, SpaceX partnership in regards to the Artemis, is that though I do admit that you're right, there are a lot of challenges and a lot of things that must be developed. The positive news is, if it proves itself and it does work, then it can go forward and be used to its full potential. If it doesn't work, NASA has to fall back to go to Lockheed or the national team or Blue Origin. But at the same time, or Dynetics
believes in the Blue Origin system, right? If he believes in Blue Moon, personal opinion, he'd need to say fuck all to NASA when they assigned it to HLS. Because if HLS fails, they're going to have to go back to their other bids, right? And at that point, Bezos could bump the price. He doesn't have to offer them anything. Say, you want to get back to the moon? That one failed. Here's what it's going to cost you. That is an option. He's got enough money. This is what a lot of people don't realize, is that when you're looking at Musk and SpaceX, everybody thinks that Musk is financing this because he's the richest guy in the world and blah, blah, blah. But if you go to, if you take a look at the billings that he's gotten from NASA, and then compare that is dwarfed by the amount of funding rounds that he's gone to, he's got a lot of money coming in there. Very, very little of it is his, right? But on the other side, Bezos is actually selling off $1 billion a year worth of Amazon stock to finance Blue Origin. Is doing what people think Musk is doing.
Well, that's still, if just running with that, if true, why aren't we seeing that come out of Blue Origin? At least with SpaceX, regardless of where that money's coming from, we're seeing progress. with Blue Origin, we're not seeing much.
Would love to see more from him. I thought that was going to happen when he left Amazon behind, when he abdicated there and moved over. And personal opinion, I think that he is trying to move as fast as he can. I don't know that he's got all the right talent in place, whatever. But that being said, he trusts his system enough to travel in it. With Branson, Musk didn't go up with the civilian, do the same thing. He doesn't trust his machine enough to sit in it. He actually believed that Dear Moon, for example, if he believed in that system, if he believed it was going to work 100%, 100% he was going to get back safe, he'd have his ass in one of those chairs.
Here's which this is actually a good comment that I actually really do am curious about. As far as ignoring Starship, actually take that back. Starship versus New Glenn, which do you think has a better business case?
Better business case. Well, business case for satellite delivery. Is that what you're going with?
Yeah, just because they're still, at the end of the day, all the claims aside, Starship is just an upper stage. Super Heavy is just another booster. Which one will be the one that actually gets more business and can gets more business and be able to actually launch more and actually be able to do more. Because of customer financing.
Starship is only going to be relegated to LEO. It's redundant, necessary. Had a heavy lifter in Falcon Heavy that can do most of what it could do, getting your bigger payloads to orbit, and it's launched 3 times. It's got a couple other launches coming up, but it's not being launched on a regular basis. Depending on the satellite configuration and whatnot that you're delivering into orbit, Starship has enough payload capacity and internal volume to deliver a large percentage of the annual deliveries to orbit. Not how it's going to happen, right? Because not all those satellites are going to be in the same orbit. They're not going to be the same elevation, the same angles, all the rest of it, right? You're not going to have one. This is eggs in the basket as well, right? If that Starship goes up, how many different customers are going to have their payloads destroyed? I'll do the dogs will bark eventually. So you can make this giant, and this goes back to the pressure-fed astronaut in his episode. You can make a giant semi. Doesn't mean that's how you're getting your groceries every week.
Which makes sense, but I mean, New Glenn is also a huge vehicle too. I mean, it's Saturn V sized.
Refresh my memory. What is the payload in tonnage on that?
Oh, I have to pull that up real fast, but I think it's like 15 to 20 tons, if I remember correctly. It's actually, honestly, payload-wise, it's awful. It is awful. And that's, coming from Starship, which I agree is not that efficient of a vehicle. It is awful also. 45 tons according to one person. I'm opening up Wikipedia. Payload to low Earth orbit, is...
So far.
Yeah, 45,000 kilograms.
Yeah, so 45 tons.
Yeah. Which, like I said, that's awful for what it is.
Both machines, if you make it too big, point. If you already have something that handles a smaller load better, send up the giant semi.
Yeah, but
and I'll be absolutely honest. We get a good kick out of the people who are talking about the delivery system that it's going to have. The way that the payload door opens on Starship, ridiculous. It opens up like a Bond. It's actually straight out of Moonraker, where the nose opens up like a Pac-Man from a single hinge point on a rounded surface. Where with shuttle, for example, it was rounded surface across the top, but the hinge points were they were down the side and they were level with each other, right? Anything is that lid when it's open, if any of the that point, it bounced off the nose and then back up into the front. And you're probably looking at a loss of mission. There's no clear exit out of what they're showing to be a satellite deploying Starship. I see what sci-fi is saying here. If they go to a shuttle-style door, now you're going more and more towards turning this into a shuttle, which is what Musk should have done with this damn thing in the first place. He should have taken an old shuttle, broken it down, new tech. That thing was a workhorse. Okay, it's a little bit old compared to the technology of the day. You upgrade the computers, you upgrade the hydraulics. Then you take those SRBs and you replace them with something like what's sending Falcon Heavy up.
But half the problem was side hefting the shuttle. Is that not even safety wise, but like tiles. Even ignoring that, you still have other issues like the payload mass was far more limited because in its current design, you're right there.
People use that excuse a lot, and it's an excuse. And you know why? It's because they weren't just delivering cargo; they were delivering crew as well. And if you're delivering crew, that takes away from what you can send up as cargo, from what you can send as payload.
But even when we look at the...
But as soon as you start introducing more people to it, you're knocking back your payload capacity.
But NASA did, I'm just bringing up, NASA did look at... Okay, that is not what I wanted. Oh, no wonder it's the wrong word. External derived LV. NASA did look at replacing the orbiter half with something that was uncrewed, and it's still the same issue that the payload mass is limited because there's only so much the balance system between a main engine. If you want to increase the mass, you have to increase the main engines or increase the side boosters, whereas if you do it vertically the way Starship is, you can keep increasing the mass and just say increase the engines, which is, they changed it to a 2-engine design. So yeah, it gives you more freedom.
That kind of brings another point that I think needs to kind of be addressed, and that is one of the, assuming everything works perfectly for the paradigm that Musk has presented, you're delivering a vehicle to orbit with the intentions of going to another planet with it. You're delivering it to orbit without everything it needs. So you get it up there, it needs refueling. I'm a rocket scientist. I don't know how to do the math, but wouldn't it make more sense to build this like a shuttle where you've got a super heavy in the middle, maybe you've got a couple of Falcon 9s on the other side, so you can actually get it into orbit with everything it needs to finish its mission? That'd make more sense.
It would, but I guess the best way they were aiming is that they want to reduce the number of parts to enable, just because if you can get to low Earth orbit, and ultimately, regardless of Mars plans, refueling is going to be a necessity for exploring this, exploring beyond pretty much Mars. Because once you reach the limitation...
Earn the $55 million that NASA has paid for him to develop this technology, before he can even start, he has to have 2 ships in orbit.
Yes,
That's
and...
one that's full.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like I said, is that we're going to need that technology. It's simple. It's done fact we need it, because even if we're going with different vehicles, say Nerva, you want to look at the nuclear rocket engine, the best designs from Werner von Braun himself, or at least NASA, I can't remember, but even his designs called for refueling, namely, sending up tankers or fuel tanks to extend that nuclear rocket engine's fuel supply. And if you can refuel it at Mars, that can give you the extra speed and acceleration you need to go even further. So, I mean, regardless of what does it, we need
finding nuclear fuel on Mars.
You might not have nuclear, but you can get hydrogen.
We're kind of tripping over each other there.
Yeah, you elaborate where you were coming from first, since you spoke first.
In order for, like, if I understood where you were going with that, Brian was saying that you would refill with nuclear material?
No, with liquid hydrogen.
Liquid hydrogen. Okay, well then you got to, depending on where things are on Mars, from what we know, if you want hydrogen, you got to go to where the liquid or the solid ice is. The ice is at the poles. The poles is the worst part of the planet to land on for for solar panels, that kind of stuff. So you have to have self-contained energy system before you can even start coring out ice to liquefy it and process it. I mean, chances are none of the water on Mars is fresh.
But you know,
how
like,
could it not be completely contaminated with perchlorate salts, since the rest of the regolith is?
but simple electrolysis should be able to, since even if you can get the gas, then you could just condense the gas via pressure.
And that requires a facility. A facility requires energy. It also requires manpower. Who's going there to work?
Which is, you know, that all falls into the exact method of what you're using. Yeah.
I mean, in theory, do we have the technology? Yes. In practice and logistically, no.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Is a lot of people, you know, you went back to, like, speaking back to history, you know, what we grew up on. A lot of people, you know, made claims that, you know, we were going to have Mars bases by 2000 and 2010, whatever, 2020. I personally do not agree, simply because you're right, we don't have the technology. We haven't, and in fact, I say that we haven't had the technology, period, until maybe 2000s to mid 2000s, when we finally gained sufficient experience from the ISS. And even then, not even to live on Mars, but just sort of fly around it, because, you know, deep space radiation remains unsolved, although technology from, say, Orion is making big leaps. Because I actually looked at the raw data from Orion's first and only flight back in 2014. It spent, what, 2 hours, 3 hours in the Van Allen belt, in the densest part. It only experienced a peak of around 10 millisieverts of radiation. For context, you and me on Earth experience 2.5 millisieverts every year. So it's only 4 times worse. It's not that toxic. It is bad for, you know, cancer-wise, but just with that.
Let's make sure that we're dealing with similar numbers here. That in the time that it spent up there, it had 10 millisieverts, right?
Yes, and yeah, that was 4 times a year's dose in about a couple of hours.
I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page here, because the difference isn't, you know, 4 times.
Well,
the
it's
difference over the time is actually about 1,200 times. Right?
Yeah. I like to keep it to 4 times a year, 4 times a year's worth, simply because it's a simpler number to run with, if that makes sense.
I like, when I put a comparison like that, I like to have the time frame the same.
Which I can understand, gives a common comparison point. But point is, even with a vehicle that unrefined, so to say, even it still could keep its crew alive in one of the more toxic environments in near Earth. You know, that's about as toxic as we can get in terms of radiation. And you would have survived if you were on Orion EFT-1. You would have experienced maybe some ill effects years down the line, but you would have survived. Your brain would have been fine, no cataracts, you know, everything like that would have been fine. So if we can make that happen, you know, again, the radiation in deep space, especially around Mars, isn't as high as the Van Allen belts. That is a concentration of radiation, whereas the radiation in deep space is much lower, closer to about 0.25 millisieverts. So, and that's per day, going back to even the Apollo program. So, of course, that obviously depends.
I forget where I saw it. It was probably just on YouTube, but it was not the scientist. I don't think it was the head. Pointed to the story. He was saying that issue with NASA going to Mars wasn't funding at the time. It wasn't even, you know, the rocket technology. The problem that they had was they didn't know how to get people back alive, and they didn't know how to deal with the radiation. So they needed to work that out first. NASA, if the system that they have in place now with ULA is going to get people delivered to Mars in a research capacity rather than a colonization capacity, then they have to know how they're going to get them back home. And there has to be a contingency plan based upon that as well. Whereas, and this is another thing that really annoys me, Musk just laughs about people potentially dying on the way there.
That is a huge issue I've been constantly pushing on people. Is I keep whenever somebody mentions how perfect Starship is, that's one of the big ones I push. Is that people keep saying you're gonna die in the spirit of exploration, but in the big catch is I accept that answer. That is a true answer. People will sadly die. However, there's a difference between it's basically like driving in a car. You can wear your seatbelt and prevent being thrown out of the windshield, or not wear your seatbelt. It's just that matter. It's not that it's an impossible, freak of nature event. Some things like a rocket exploding during launch, you can prevent that. You can prevent death in that aspect. You can take action to prevent it without it being unrealistic. You don't need to turn the astronauts into bubble wrap, wrap them in bubble wrap. There are things you can do that make them safer while also preventing death. So that's my opinion. Is that I will agree on that.
You have your plan A, you have your plan B, you should have a plan C just in case. But your plan A shouldn't be, yep, you're probably going to die.
Yeah, and that's honestly when it comes to stuff like launch safety, that is the most common answer. And although I will say a lot of people also don't understand, even though they love and follow SpaceX, they don't seem to fully understand, because one of the people in the chat, actually, he did a graph and he actually did the numbers, and that up to a certain point, Starship can escape super heavy if all the engines or half the engines. He has the graph. He can show you the graph. But the chances of escaping are very slim early on, simply because Starship doesn't even have a TWR of 1. It can, if fully fueled, it cannot get away from super heavy, even if it wasn't exploding. The drag and everything else will simply squeeze it back together. Now, of course, going with the notion of it being swung out, or as one person mentioned, again, I'll have to see how that works. But this is an emergency abort situation where you're obviously not being able to rely on pre-planned.
I'm having a tough time with the word slump. I can't even picture what it is that they're looking at. It's just a lack of familiarity with how other vehicles work. But I'm having a hard time putting that word in that context.
Yeah, like I said, I'm also going to be very curious to see how that exactly works. I mean, they did mention Starlink, and I mean, in theory that would work since it's just centrifugal force. It's not that complicated. You rotate and you will be pulled apart. It's very simple. It doesn't add anything, but at the same time, you're speaking of two very large vehicles in very close proximity, and if there's a high altitude air current, what will that do to them? Similar maneuver to Starlink. Yeah. So, yeah, I'd actually would like to see that animation. So, again, I'm not saying it won't work. I'm just saying I'd like to see it. Well,
and again, I think that goes for most of what we've talked about. Everybody would like to see it. Everybody else, everybody also has to realize that a lot of what you're being shown is 90% hype, if not more. A lot of it. We had kind of the same thing happen with Tesla as happened with SpaceX, right? Tesla needed to stay afloat, so they started pumping FSD back in 2015, 2016. That raised the money, and it literally got Tesla out of the bankrupt situation. You see serious money going into SpaceX from VCs until they started pumping Mars. Go back and you can check that. Their first $1 billion raise was the same month that he released ITS. History. So in order to keep that money coming in, he's got to keep pushing this narrative, right, further and further down the road. When machines launched for Mars in 2020, at the forefront of the headlines was Musk, who didn't launch anything. Mars.
So one actual question I had is, wait, having less than 1 Gbps in that bad both are. Yeah, they're both in free fall, but the drag on super heavy is still the inertia, I should say, is still in a play. No name. Anyway, yeah, I forgot my question. Sorry. So.
All right.
Yeah, it's only been an hour.
It's been almost 2 hours of discussion, and I don't think that we really stumped each other that much.
Yeah. Oh, that was my question. Is would you say that admittedly there is a fine line of how much is acceptable, but would you say that hype is bad just in general, bringing interest and excitement into this industry and this not just a hobby, but this whole aspect of the world that especially as it's growing so dramatically in this decade.
Okay, so this is an overpromise, underdeliver situation, right? Where people are promised so much and are expecting all of it to come true. What happens when it doesn't come true? What happens to people's hopes and dreams and visions and whatever when, for example, blows up on the pad, wipes out the launch facility, and the FAA shuts it down? What happens then? Are you looking at a 1-year rebuild plus investigation? Are you looking at a 2 or 3 year rebuild? Are you looking at the same type of investigation as after Challenger blew up? You know, if that's the case, then that site and that manufacturing, all of it at Boca Chica would be shut down for 3 years. Can the company survive that? I think personally, now that Musk is telling everybody, you know, how he's the richest man in the world, I think he can be done taking public money, and I think that money can go back to people like Rocket Labs or Electron or somebody else who needs it more than Musk does, because Musk needs money. He's the richest guy in the world, right? Richest guy in history. Why does he need public money? So you take it and you put it into the lesser developed companies that can do the jobs that Musk intends to leave behind, because Starship, Musk has told everybody, once Starship is up and running, that's going to replace Falcon 9, it's going to replace Falcon Heavy. Those are going to get shit canned, they'll use up what they have left, and that'll be the end of that program. If he intends to do that, that opens doors for somebody else to fill in that delivery system. If that delivery system isn't filled in, now you have a gap in the market. So is all the hype for SpaceX good? No, it's not, because a lot of it's not going to be delivered on, especially in the time frame that it's been promised, and that hype could be going, that hype and public money could be going to another company that might have better tech. You don't know, because it's not being developed.
Okay. All right, so since I'm wanting to wrap this up, can I, again, since this time I'm actually intending to it, since I have stuff to do here soon, so would you be okay with a few more chat questions if I filter them? Oh, that's not what I want to ask. Sorry, I know you might have a good question, but at the same time, I'm trying not to alienate, so... one point somebody mentioned is that without crew, they might not need such an intensive investigation, but still, investigation is an investigation, and at least NASA was a government one, so they may have also had some efficiencies, whereas a corporate company will have to go through.
Said you're thinking about using this for HLS, and you see it blow up on the pad, and completely take out your launch facility, and who knows how much surrounding area. Do you think you're still going to endorse that for human flight? I mean, the thing doesn't have an abort system as it is.
And another question I'm seeing is, he's been asking, so I might as well, if you're the same guy that does Twitter.
Take turns on Twitter, and we went back to Reddit for a couple of weeks. Like Reddit. The other main researcher that we've got, he doesn't like it. We were in there to begin with, and it's just... it's like a whorehouse, nothing but cunts and assholes in Reddit. So we're pretty much done there.
Yeah, trust me, I get Reddit because, well, I've just like you, I have graced the front page of SpaceX Master Race many a time. So, yeah, I'm familiar with that.
There's certain forums that are worth time, and there's right now we're still trying to juggle this channel as a hobby, and trying to keep our regular jobs going and putting out as much material as we possibly can. We took off a huge chunk of material when we started with the Solar City bailout trial. We got to get caught up there, right? So we can't all be on all the different social medias where it's time to pick and choose. I used Facebook as a backup because we can actually post larger, longer, like, for example, the transcription from our open letter to the FAA that went up on the Facebook because it was so long that it wouldn't even post on my YouTube community page for whatever reason. Never had that happen before. And, Twitter's pretty useful. We got talked into that 3 or 8 months ago. I never wanted to be on Twitter. I actually thought that lives spent their lives on Twitter, but it's a great marketing thing for when we have a new episode coming out. Of course, we want it to get as much exposure as we possibly can, right?
Yeah, wanting to make YouTube, yeah, trust me. I definitely get where you're coming from with that. So, yeah, Kiwi's right. Yeah, Twitter can be a hellscape too. Trust me. So, another question is,
I think that with a lot of things, so far as social media goes, you can go overboard and you can spend your whole life on there, and then you don't actually around to what it is that your goal is. And our goal is not to spend time on social media. Our goal is to produce more episodes and create more discussions.
Which, like I said, makes sense. And another question, though, I saw, and it's another one, is how many people work with you on this?
It depends on the day and on the project, and anywhere from 4 to 6. Now we're down 2 guys, which is why the newest episode isn't out right now. One of the guys at the home taking care of his teenage daughter was in a car wreck, broke her back, and one of the other guys is filling in down in his shop. So I'm holding down the fort with one other fella here right now.
Okay. And so to wrap this up, just what have your been thoughts on this discussion so far? Anything you agree with, anything things you know what I'm saying,
No, I think generally speaking, I was able to remember most of what I needed to from what we put together, whether it was my portion or not. The conversations are great, debates are great, arguments are useless, right? So
yeah,
I see some people in a thing here. How come you block people? Because you're an asshole, right? Probably because you flooded one of the feeds with a bunch of nonsense, and we didn't have time for it because we don't. The fact that we're still able to, as a team, respond to comments on our channel from 32,000 subscribers, we still respond to damn near all of them, right? And that could be a full-time job. So if you're here to stir up shit or cause nonsense or ask the same question a dozen frickin' times, you're gone. And I don't care. Nobody cares. If you're just time murderers is one of the things around the shop here, right? If you're a time murderer, you're down the road.
All right, and yeah, just what about your thoughts with what I've said and the few things like I've brought up?
Again, for the most part, both of us are operating in the dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with a lot of what ifs and look at this CGI and this is what was said and this was what was in that news release. And until we get something that you can walk into, until you get something you can put your eyeballs on that's real, that you can touch, that, like with the Blue Origin and the Dianetics mockups. Once you can walk into it and see what it is that they're trying to build, now you got a much better idea how pieces are going to fit together, what systems are going to be required, how big those systems need to be, what do they weigh, because whatever they weigh, see, what a lot of people don't understand about the 100 or now some say 150 tons that Starship is supposed to be able to take to Mars. That includes all the beds, all the floors, all the walls, all the ladders, all the EVA suits, all the rest of it, right? You're not going to get 100 tons of people and food in that ship, because as soon as you start adding all of it together, then you're way over your limit and you got to start taking stuff out, whether it's people or food or gear.
No, and like we said, we've already discussed that. Ultimately, in my opinion, progress is progress, and although Starship may not have an interior, at least it has rocket engines and fuel tanks. And in the polar opposite case, whereas say National Team doesn't have an engine to show for it, it does have a mock-up. Like I said, progress is progress, and getting us to the moon.
Being absolutely honest, this shows ass backwards commercial space is, and people are going to disagree with that, and that's fine. But it had all these teams working together. Had the squat lander that's got a chance landing on the regolith without falling over. If you've got the engines that SpaceX has developed, if you've got the other gear, and you're able to pull from all the different arenas, they would have a full ship by now. We'd be on the freaking moon. But everybody's doing their own thing. and everybody's being paid by the government to do their own thing, rather than the government saying, you build this, you build that, we'll glue them all together and away we go, which is how it used to be done.
Yeah.
NASA let this aspect of space travel go so they could concentrate on the deep space stuff with ULA, and that was a huge mistake. They kept it all in-house, subcontractors, telling them what to build, to what specs, with what connections, using what fuels, whatever. And then you put that together and you stack it up aside with 4 other companies' creations, and away you go.
Yeah, but to be fair, national team does have multiple.
That physically and cost-wise makes a hell of a lot more sense than 3 or 4 companies internationally doing their own thing.
Yeah, and that's the big catch is that with ULA, I only recently discovered that their existence as a collaboration between the two companies is actually very rocky, and only really came about because of shady business practices that Boeing did prior to their formation. So even between these companies like ULA, there's still a lot of betrayal and competition.
Then, when you look at ULA's track record, they've been to Mars 20 times.
They have. Before, they did it prior to. Boeing was the one that, if I remember correctly, yeah, I'm pretty sure Boeing was the one because they ran the Delta II. So, what is your question? Oh. Again, I'm trying not to alienate here. So, yeah, and there is competition. There has been competition in just about everything NASA's done, and it Emoji Ozir here mentioned that even the Apollo lunar lander had a competition. I actually went back and read it. Is that the designs were quite interesting, because there was nothing to stop us from, say, using the Gemini spacecraft to go to the moon. There really wasn't. That spacecraft was, it was very primitive, but well overbuilt to do a task like that, where if it were modified it could. So there has been competition. They tried to split it up.
You take a look at that paradigm, and you had people competing for the lander, and you had people competing for the rockets, or whatever it is, however it was broken down. But at the end of the day, the winner of that competition, who could prove their system worked, incorporated into a larger program that was kind of jigsawed together, right, with other things that worked from other people who built in their special areas, right? Obviously, so far as the Merlins go, the SpaceX has a hand up. Not as convinced on the Raptors. They have to replace a lot of Raptors after static fires, right? But they've got motors that Blue Origin, if they had the motors, you'd be in great shape. SpaceX could benefit from stuff that Blue Origin's put together, the mock-up on a lander that has, like I said, you don't have to rely on a cable crane to get down to the ground. It's ladders. I think there's a small elevator or something like that for getting the payload to the surface.
Yeah.
If you're able to kind of take the best of everything and pick and choose, we probably already have a system. It's just nobody's willing to work together.
Well, that's a big thing about National Team, and it is a group, and one of them is Grumman. One of the people that participates in that group is Blue Origin, Lockheed, and Grumman. And Grumman's important because they're the one that made the lunar module back in 1960. But the big catch is, as far as, you can't really say that the development has been slow on Starship, especially in relation to HLS, because you got to remember, the lunar module was delayed so significantly back in the 60s that NASA actually had to reconfigure the mission schedule to add an additional crew mission to the moon because the lunar module just wasn't ready to go to low Earth orbit with crew. Not even go to the moon. It was so far behind in development, they had to add a new mission. That's where we got Apollo 8 from. It's kind of, that's, I especially like going back to history because it kind of gives context for, not excuses, but it gives sort of context to why things might happen the way they do, especially since with a crewed lunar lander, it's...
Time obviously worked back then. Why it wouldn't work now, why they've gone with a completely different paradigm where everybody's kind of left to their own devices, that's something that they need to take up at NASA. Because they're spreading themselves too thin, so thin that they could only afford to go with the cheapest, not the best or whatever, right? They went with the cheapest.
Well, to be fair, they also don't have the funding. I mean, honestly, I'll be fully honest. I think they chose SpaceX half as a political ploy, because they knew if they chose SpaceX, Congress would get angry. They would get all sort of upset that NASA didn't pick their team and throw more money at them, which coincidentally is exactly what happened. NASA picked SpaceX, Congress got mad, Congress gave more money to HLS. Not enough. It's still heavily underfunded.
NASA chose SpaceX, but did it before their new administrator could come in. It was actually a deputy, a lady, I forget what her name is.
And no, it was Steve Gertzer. I can't pronounce his name, it was Steve something or other.
Single-handedly picked it before the new guy could come in, after Bridenstine left.
Yeah, and although it may have not been his best position, it definitely was a good move. And again, maybe you can argue that Starship isn't the optimal choice. Anything that gets NASA more money is a good choice, because what if they did choose national team? Would they have gotten that same amount of money? There's no guarantee. Whereas now NASA has funding not just for one lander, but larger amount of money for two.
NASA used to, used to always have a backup plan. There's no backup plan with HLS. If HLS fails, then nobody else is working on it right now, right? Or if they are, we don't hear about it anymore. If Blue Origin and National Team and Dynetics is still working on their respective machines, I don't think we've heard anything about that since they chose, right?
If I remember correctly, Blue Origin is still quote unquote working on it, but again, that's Blue Origin quote unquote.
Blue Origin now wants to, they seem to be focusing on their orbital reef, right? That's their new project.
But that's the thing. We never heard that they canceled it. They said they, if I remember correctly, they had a commercial contract to land a payload on the moon. But again, the timeline, the hardware, when it'll launch, all of that is entirely up in the air and completely unheard.
was given the contract from NASA to develop nuclear engines, weren't they?
Say again. Who?
Blue Origin? Weren't they
I think it was ULA. It was either Blue or ULA. I can't remember.
I thought it was Bezos.
I'll have to look that up. I mean, I am aware that NASA is starting that up. That is not new to me. But as to who, both, yeah, Nerva, Blue Origin. Let's see what comes up. Nerva, depending on what's launched, Blue Origin, and Lockheed Martin, if I'm Popular Mechanics accordingly. So again, I'll look this up further. But
so he has some faith in Blue Origin.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they get money, right?
Yeah, well, everyone's trying to give Blue Origin some credit. They want Blue Origin to fly, but it just, year after year after year for a vehicle that just. And I asked the question, and I never really put in my input, but asking, will Blue Origin or New Glenn be viable? My opinion is, if Starship even matches, it's even 10%, just 10% of its claims, even if it's $100 million each, it would be a huge win for, would be a huge competitor against New Glenn, because it's a good rocket when it competes against Falcon 9. Falcon 9, it's a good competitor too, but they're talking about retiring Falcon 9. I mean, of course, that probably won't happen until 2030, but even then, it's just Starship, just even the ballpark numbers that skeptics from the outside can do, $100 million for that vehicle would be very reasonable, since it's fully reusable. It won't take $20 million to inspect the tiles or the fuel tanks and the engines. It won't take that much. So, and that's what is New Glenn going to be? It has to be less than $100 million just to beat it. So it's a good vehicle, built for the last decade. That's my opinion.
That's probably a fair assessment. It was due the last decade. You ought to be into 5 or 6 years of reiterations on that design by now.
Yeah, and that's we hear something about Project Jarvis, but I'm not holding my breath, because even if it works out, even if it is fully reusable, the launch system itself is still also so limited. Because here's the big thing: because it's using a Hydrolox upper stage, it doesn't actually get enough speed that it ends up suffering for. Whereas the Atlas V with its Hydrolox stage, it throws it with enough speed to begin with that the loss by using a low density fuel is made up for. But with New Glenn, it's reusable, so it's having to basically get into orbit and then waste more fuel just to go anywhere else. So it's not very practical. Although I need to figure out how to pronounce your name. URL86 asks, what's your opinion on cost plus versus fixed cost contracts? It's a good question in my opinion.
If this is a commercial space question, I don't think the public money ought to be doled out before they deliver it at all. If he doesn't believe that they can't deliver it properly, then they shouldn't take the contract. If they think they can deliver it properly, they can get paid when they deliver.
So
you don't pay salespeople on future commissions. Pay contractors on future builds until at least certain milestones are done, right? Like if you're to hire somebody for a mechanic, let's say a mechanic, you take your car into the shop, you don't pay when you go in, you pay when you leave. You don't pay when the addition on your house is started, you pay when it's finished. And it shouldn't really be any different in this context. Like we said, he's the richest man in the world. He doesn't need public money, he just takes it, but he doesn't need it. Off his Tesla stock, and he can start financing stuff himself the way that Bezos does, even if Bezos is further behind the timeline.
Well, one person mentions that, and this is true. I actually have done the look into it. It's part of my data sheet. SpaceX has only gotten the first of many. There are many parts of the HOS contract, but they've only gotten paid one sum of it. So
that wasn't really the question, though, right?
Okay, fair enough. That wasn't the exact question, but just felt like it was worth mentioning.
Yeah. Certainly, milestone payments are it's how most large things get built, whether you're talking about a sidewalk or highway or house or whatever. You pay some up front to catch the materials, and then as milestones are reached, then you get additional payments. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, when it comes to rocket development, or whether it's the engine development or whatever, you can get 90% of the way there, but then not deliver it. The last 10% or the last 5% or the last 0.1%, because it gets tougher and tougher and tougher as you get more of it done. It's like finishing a house. You can do the outside really quick. Getting to lockup is nothing compared to laying the floors, doing the plumbing, doing the electro, all the rest of it, right? And it's the tiddly details, like the trim and the doorknobs and that kind of stuff, that add up and eat away your time. So if you can't deliver the whole thing, end of it, you'd be getting paid along the way either, I don't think. Because you can leave a house 90% done and somebody else can come over and take it over, right? But you either deliver a finished rocket or you don't.
Well, would you say that we have more of a finished rocket from SpaceX than, say, New Glenn, for example?
I would say that they are ahead of New Glenn, but I don't call it a rocket. I don't even call it a prototype. I call it a test article.
Okay. Well, and this is actually something I asked you in a Twitter post. I showed you a picture of the Pathfinder of Vulcan. Is that a prototype or is that a full vehicle?
I don't remember that.
Which is fair. You probably get a lot of posts, so give me a second. I'll pull up the exact image. Pathfinder. Because they recently rolled it out to the pad. They filled it up with fuel. It was, completely... they did all the work to prep it, but it doesn't have an upper stage. But here's the big catch. Is that a prototype or is that a full vehicle?
You can't launch whatever vehicle it is and have it conduct a mission for which it's designed, and it's a test article, not a prototype.
But here's the big catch. It can't launch in its current configuration, but ULA is planning on using that exact booster for its first flight. So where does that fall?
Booster we're talking about.
Yeah, hold on. I'm pulling up the image now. Doop, boop, boop, and there. So, like I said, that is the first booster. However, it does not have flight engines. It does not have an upper stage. But again, that booster will still be the one to go to orbit for the first time.
It's built out.
Yeah, and they have the
stack, and when it has engines on it, then what you're looking at right now is an unfinished product. It's not even a test article.
But it's being tested. I mean, they just finished the wet dress.
They had to have engines put on it?
It has demo engines. Engines that can do everything. I think, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they static fired them, but it will do everything. No, I don't think they did. They have engines. They're just demo engines. The real flight engines are being test fired at wherever Blue Origin does them.
So I'm a little curious why we're asking if something is unfinished and not stacked could even be considered a prototype.
Well, that's a big question. That's where my question comes in. Is the booster itself will go to orbit. It's not going to be. It's going to be doing a commercial mission. It's sending a payload to the moon. So, is this particular article where does that fall?
It's part of the machine. By itself, if you tried launching that right as it is, blunt nose is going to catch the air, and it's going to. I'm guessing that there's a hollow at the front of it, where the other engines would go from the upper stage. Is that a right guess?
Like I said, it does have engines. It does have engines. I'll pull up an. So yeah, this is a good image. Doop boop boop. Save. Thankfully, it's already a JPEG. Image 2. Browse. Where's it? There. Like I said, it does have 2 demo engines, and according to one person, apparently it has more sensors that I was not aware of. But again, it's entirely built just the wrong engines and no upper stage. That's it.
It's got demo engines on it. It's got sensors connected to it, and they're not going to launch this, but they're going to fire it up to see what type of data they get off of it, correct?
No, I don't think that's what I said. Everything on this is real except the engines. Everything else will go to orbit in the future. They have to rip the engines out because the engines are just demos.
It's a test article. Prototype.
Only the engines are, because, like I said, once they remove those engines, it's going to be a commercial mission.
I think we're talking in circles here.
Maybe there is some confusion because
where I put that, it's either doing a mission or it's a first of a kind that can do the mission, or it's not quite there yet. And the not quite there yet is a test article.
Yeah, the best way I could describe it is the same way as if like SLS were to launch Crew, like and they were to have different engines, boilerplate RS-25s. The rest of the rocket is real, so I guess that would be the better way to describe it.
But I don't think that explanation changes what category this fits into.
Just an interesting comparison, since again, Vulcan will have never gone to orbit, but yet the fuel tanks and everything else on the vehicle, aside from those engines, are the same ones. It's the exact vehicle. They're just reusing.
What do people call it then? Is this something that's being considered a prototype? Is that why the question?
Well, it's just you mentioned the comparison between the two, and I was just, like I said, I asked back then. Just might as well continue to ask it since I had that question, because, like I said, it's a kind of you could say it's a prototype, but it really, it also isn't, because it's real.
Prototypes are real.
Okay.
We're not talking concept drawings. A prototype is something that was, and this is a comparison I used on Twitter there the other day. Or if I hand you a weapon and I say it's a prototype, you should be able to take that weapon out to the range, fire a couple of clips through it, and the thing not blow up in your hands. If it can't do that, if it blows up in your hands on the very first round that you pull the trigger on, then it's not a fully functional prototype. It's a hazard.
But what if the gun was real, but the bullets aren't? Just, running by the same, because that's basically what the engines are. The entire rocket is real, just not the bullets or engines.
The rifle that can only fire blanks, you're still looking at a test article.
Okay.
A prototype needs to be fully fleshed out functional. This needs to be what will go into production if it's successful, as is. Without changing very much other than maybe system layouts or wiring diagrams or the conduits. But if let's say you run this through its paces and you have to change the motors, well then the original it might have been a prototype, now it's a failed prototype because it didn't work the way that it was supposed to.
But to be fair, at least in the current configuration, I mean, Starship isn't the same way. I mean, the engines are all the same. It's just everything above the fuel tanks that are changing. I like this picture better. It's higher res.
So, I mean, it'll do its. Everything goes the way that you guys hope it will.
Which is fair, but that goes for any rocket.
So, I mean, did it conduct its mission? Yeah, but the mission was useless other than showing that you could launch it, right? You might be able to get some, well, they'll have sensors all over the thing for data and how the machine reacts and whatnot. But if you're looking at saying that this is going to be human rated, then no, you're still not at your prototype.
Well, I'm just comparing it to
delivery, not a prototype of your human.
Yeah.
Rated.
Yeah, personally, I hold it in the same degrees we see with.
Hold on just a sec. I gotta let the dog
Okay.
go.
Oh, where's the mute? Oh, whoop. Where is it? Okay. Potentially, yeah, but whenever I'm mass protection ready, yeah. Until he gets back, what I'll say for you is that I'm holding, he's mentioning prior starships, SN-15 and all that. Even disregarding that, SN-20 is very much in the same case that SLS, Vulcan. I'd say New Glenn, but we don't even have New Glenn to look at. So, yeah. That's where I hold it, is that just like Vulcan or SLS, it's built, it's tested in segments, but we don't know how it performs as a whole system, and all of them could fail. Is in a different league. Yeah, in a vaporware league. That's just sad. There are parts of it. Yeah, the Pathfinder, great, but we had an SLS Pathfinder in like 2018. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And that's, again, 20, if it was 2017, 2016, and we had a Pathfinder, that'd be fine. But we don't have a Pathfinder. Yeah. Oh, okay, fair enough. Welcome to our suborbitals.
Okay. The first machine that was offered to the public from Musk, ITS and the BFR, and here we are 7 years later, it's still not in orbit.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I was looking at it.
A little bit quicker with their iterative process. As it is right now, your launches are 20% successful recovery of the vehicle, but 100% explosion or fire.
Actually, where's my data sheet? According to my specifications, and I'm pretty harsh, but where is it? Maximum uses success rate for Starship currently is 67%. Noting that success is to land. Typically, I say land. Because looking back, I'll go ahead and post it for you.
It's successful if there was people on there, you could have got them off before it blew up.
Which is basically my condition. I have Twitter tweets where I have discussions where I explain what my conditions are for each one of those tests. But come on now. Point is, you can look at all of these, and there are a large part of them are just partial failures, because it does successfully launch. If it was just being an expendable rocket, it succeeds in doing that, but not Oh, wrong tab. Anyway, it doesn't succeed in landing, which is a critical component of being fully reusable. As long as it, yeah, and that was the big issue I had with a lot of people on Twitter. Is a lot of people said that as long as it flies, that's a good data. Even if it launches, it's good data. But I argue that yes, data is a good point, but the ultimate goal remained that, especially in the early tests, it's to launch and land. And at least with like SN8, when it was the first of its kind, I gave it that pass. But like SN9 and 10, it was the same mission. Go up and land. Go to 10 kilometers roughly and land. And it failed. Which is why, what is it? What is this? Failure. So, 87. Which is why, 87. Yeah, which is why SN9 is listed as a straight up failure. And we've seen it staggering.
SN9 and SN8. On its side.
Yeah.
SN8 was only off by, what, 7-10 degrees, something like that?
Yeah. Which one is this? A partial failure? That's 88. So 88 was SN10, yeah, and that was the one that landed and then exploded. Which is why it's partial failure. It did land, but that's a big thing, is that, just launching isn't good enough to me when your goal is to land. And as to staggering progress, quote unquote, there has been progress. I wouldn't call it staggering, given all it's done is land from 10 kilometers. The DCX.
And of course, they completely screwed the pooch by launching 11 in the fog.
Yeah, definitely. That should have been a testing violation period. But more importantly to that, they also could have continued to launch SN16 instead of leaving it there to, rust right now.
Well, I mean, we were promised that 15 was going up again.
And it still could. I don't know.
What date? Not gonna happen. Pad inspection should take you 2 weeks.
Yeah, I hear that people say that they're just focusing on the orbital pad and they don't want to go with the closures and everything, which makes somewhat sense. But considering the size of the facility they have, I doubt that would be a very, very viable excuse, seeing as they could just, I don't know. I don't like.
To the DPE. They're looking at expanding the number of hours of closures from 300 to 800, including 3 hours, 300 hours of cleanup, 500 hours of closure, and 300 hours of cleanup. So if you take a look at that, that's and of course you're only allowed to, according to the Texas state law, operate the launches from 7 to 7, right? Let's take it as an 8-hour day of closures. That's 100 days. That's 3 months of closures. Where people can't access their community properly, where they have to be out of their houses, where the beaches are being unused, and the environmentalists can't go in and take care of business, and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And if this is this step, then the next step's going to be worse.
Yep. And going back to what you were all, they're just insisting about testing. The big catch to me is something can be a failure and still be good for data. That is not mutually exclusive. Because you could look at Apollo 6, the second flight of the Saturn V. As far as the mission goes, it was a god-awful failure. So many things failed. And yet, despite being a failure, my opinion is it was the most important mission prior to Apollo 11. Simply because it let them learn from the failures and mistakes of that mission to correct and improve the vehicle in such a way that by the time they did fly crew on it, Apollo 8, by that time they had the confidence that they knew the vehicle was more prepared and was able to combat those issues. Again, failure does not mean bad. Failure means that it did not meet the goals and intentions that they set for it. Getting data is not a goal unless you're trying to be a scientist, unless you've got a notepad and paper and you are going to repeat. That's a big thing. You have to repeat your experiment for it to be purely data. And although they kept relaunching, guess what? It clearly wasn't data, since they stopped right as they landed it one time. They landed it one time and they stopped. If they wanted data, they would have landed it at least twice, preferably 3 times. And that's all, yeah.
Right now, what you're left with is, well, our last flight was a success. But you don't know was by luck of the draw.
Exactly. Could have been a fluke.
No fluke, right? And based on the other 4 RUDs, it is a fluke. You're looking at a 20% success rate. But going into the FAA, because this has actually been open for over a year, okay? This isn't something that was just opened up this summer that ended yesterday. This is something that was opened up over a year ago. It was November 2019, I think is when they started this up. No, going back too far. Just last year, November 2020. You know, going into the public input sessions and, you know, having the scientists and whatnot, you know, give their reports. You know, right now what you're looking at is a vehicle that's still standing. It has obviously completely different optics than the last one, and they're still cleaning up the mess, which they are still cleaning up the mess from SN11.
Yeah, but that, as we said, that one was just screwing the pooch with the testing practices.
FAA should have really kind of cranked down on them after that one.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, what the hell are you doing?
And I
you
mean,
couldn't see your hand launching a rocket up.
Exactly, and to be fair, I can't entirely throw FAA under the bus, because just like NASA, not only are they underfunded, they're also insanely understaffed. And I come from, you know, I say that since I actually worked with aircraft, and I worked on aircraft, and to start doing that, you need the licensing and the certifications, you need all that just to get started. And not only that, but all the problems and all the reviews and everything has to go through them, and it takes forever because they're understaffed. They are constantly. It's why things like the 737 MAX issue occurred. It's because they absolutely have to give more. They have to put that load on the companies and not themselves, because they don't have the man hours or the manpower to make it happen on their own. If they had more people, I have no doubt they could.
They could ask the richest man in the world for some additional staff that would help them get there.
Yeah. My opinion, since you mentioned it as him being the richest man in the world, could he? Yes, he could do that. Ultimately, sadly, we can't ask him to, because private citizen, private money. Although I won't argue, could he? Yes. You know, that is possible.
I mean, if manpower is actually the issue, and he wants to get this done, you know, within the next 12 months, because if it goes into a full EIS, your timeline is completely thrown off. There's no saying when that will end.
Exactly, and somebody mentioned
and it will involve a full launch explosion analysis, right?
Yeah, and that's what somebody mentioned, is that why does the fog matter? It doesn't matter for the vehicle. It matters for the people analyzing and reviewing and trying to improve on it. Going back to data. How can you get data from something you can't see? Especially since we also know the communication that day was awful. So we can't even go on the data.
All the guys that are down there with their cameras on the pad watching paint dry, all of them were caught by surprise. Dodd was caught by surprise. Padre, nobody had a view. Everybody thought their gear was shot too after the thing crashed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the, you know.
Yep. Dodd thought that he lost his brand new camera. He's almost in tears.
Yeah. Although I'm honestly expecting for us not to have those cameras much longer, since it seems to go every other month that somebody's tampering or even straight up taking his cameras.
Well, I mean, you leave stuff out there, people are going to think that they're entitled to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just that state of affairs.
Yeah, especially as that site becomes more and more popular. So, and
it looks like we're... What was it that you had to go do? Because you're 35 minutes late going to do it.
Honestly, I just have to pick somebody up at 6. So, I mean, I just wanted to leave some time to, like, tidy up. But, you know, like I said, just a good discussion, or at least having enough discussion going forward just sort of pushes that back. But either way, it was still nice having you, and I appreciate you at least tolerating the chat, if that makes sense.
That's all right. I see a lot of familiar names, let's put it that way.
Yeah. And that's the big thing about it, is that I don't try to hate anyone for what they believe or what they expect, because even though I may not agree, at the end of the day, it doesn't damn well matter. It doesn't damn well matter if Starship blows up tomorrow, or it doesn't matter if Starship becomes the only rocket in the... Well, I'd argue that, but at the same time, it doesn't matter what I think, because at the end of the day, the billionaires, that own and operate these things are going to continue doing what they're going to do. It doesn't matter.
The sad state of it is that money is controlling what's happening not only in space travel but also in the communities that are in this case, in Boca Chica's case, they're being taken over to facilitate it. Actually, a little disturbing.
Yeah, well, you could also say that kind of happened to Titusville because I need more data on it, but I want to do like a how do I put it, an income, like the overall wealth of the town analysis, because you look at it in the biggest boom of Titusville, which is right outside the Kennedy Space Center. It's right outside of there.
20 kilometers away from 39A.
Yeah, it's right next to that. And you look historically, the biggest boom when the town was the biggest and the most wealthy was in the late 60s, early 70s. When was that at its poorest? Close to the shuttle program, closest to 2009, 2010. Yes, there was a recession, but that was a double whammy. Not only were they losing jobs and losing people living there, putting money into the city, but they were also in the recession, so they were hit super bad, which is why that city is still pretty rough, even like 10 plus years later. Not only that, yeah, somebody mentions all its tourists, less tourists until those last shuttle launches. That was the only thing that really brought it. So. Yeah, so like I said, maybe there are plus and minuses to everything, but I mean, it does bring money because, again, looking at Titusville, it brought a lot of money. It made it a very rich city for that part of the state.
For that part of it, I think that's kind of where we like keywording things, right?
Comparatively,
wasn't with a continuous rise.
It was nothing's ever continuous, but it did improve until there were other circumstances, like the leaving of the shuttle program, the dying of the program. That definitely, even without the recession, that was a problem. So, like I said, it can bring money, but ultimately, like I said, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. At least we can enjoy the rockets. It's going to be an exciting time regardless.
Yeah, and the more they build it out, or the more they crash it, or whatever, then the more data we get and more material we get for our channels. So.
And exactly, even if Starship doesn't work out, maybe somebody can take that idea and take that data and make it work. Who knows?
I think before Starship is in its final form, it's going to resemble Shuttle a lot more than anybody thinks right now.
I mean, it already has.
All they need to do is mark those the cargo opening down the side of it to where the sides are straight up and down, and you're pretty much there.
Yeah, pretty much. There's actually, oh man, let's see if I can find that old meme. Starship. Yeah, there was actually somebody made an image of it basically evolving, anamorphing into a space shuttle. Because that's, I mean, honestly, there are quite a few. So.
I don't know which one you're looking at, but I know that at least one like that.
Yeah, it by itself may not be a popular image, but if you saw it, you could definitely understand what I was explaining. How
people who like Starship love shitting on Shuttle, don't they?
Yeah, and that's definitely something I find ironic given the safety issues, seeing as it literally did duplicate some of the hazards. And although, okay, I'm Ozier, you make a fair point. Space Shuttle was always weighted for the start. The Starship wasn't. I recently come to understand why that changed the way it did. It wasn't arbitrary, and at first I was blaming it on Elon Musk because he has all these crazy ideas. But it recently clicked in my head why it all happened that way. And the simple answer is, as Starship perfected and improved the Falcon 9 landing method in being able to land it precisely, they got more confident. As they got more confident, they managed to reduce the amount of vertical travel from, when it reaches bottom. Instead of, they reduce the amount of height from when it turns completely vertical, they reduce that height lower and lower and lower. And as they did that, they want to bleed more speed off sideways. But because if you're going to be trying to go sideways at 10 kilometers, the aerodynamics are going to start to take over. So the cheapest way on fuel to overcome the air is to have wings. It's simple as that. That's why you look at it, the lower that flip is, that's when you saw the wings get bigger and bigger. It's not just a pop out of nowhere. It was gradual. It started as a lifting body, as a blunt lifting body.
Shuttle just got tiny little delta wings in the back end, right? Drawings.
Yeah. It actually, it had quite big delta wings at the beginning. It had you look at the X. I pretty much always base it off the X-20 because that's where it started, basically. Though some people might argue, I basically consider the X-20 one of the earliest space shuttles because that's where the concept of a reusable winged spacecraft came from. The X-20. Sure, it started over again, but it was the same delta-winged vehicle. You know, like I said, because of the size, though, it probably could have flown a lot better. But then again, the space shuttle's terrible aerodynamics also have a reasonable justification.
All right.
All right, but yeah, it was nice having you. So, I'm sure you have things to do. So,
yeah, I got dogs I gotta let in and feed. So,
all right,
it's been an interesting talk.
It has, and I'm so glad to have you.
Have yourself a good one, and
You too.
Now that we've had the chat, maybe you could check out a couple episodes and do it.
Yep, I'll see what I can do. All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, before I wrap up, what are your thoughts? I'm not trying to be unfair, but straight Twitter talk, or not Twitter, chat talk. I have a few minutes, but give you like 5 minutes to say what you said. He's got. Excuse me, I must clear my throat. Okay, I expected that to go worse than it did. Honestly, yeah, I didn't know how that would go, so. Like I said, I'm just glad that you just stepped out. It made it a lot easier, because I don't feel right blocking people or removing people from my chat. That feels wrong. But at the same time, you definitely made a very big, did the right thing. I don't want to be rude to take it personally. This was a ramble. I could have done better. I will admit. I tried to stick to a few points, and admittedly, I could have done better. But hey, for my first actual debate, it wasn't terrible. I will try to upload the VOD, the Twitch VOD, whatever that thing is, to YouTube, so that way it's viewable there. Focuses too much on the things that aren't relative. There were a few things, yes, but like I said on Twitter, he doesn't get you. Exactly. That was the big thing, is I actually appreciated that I managed to get it into a conversation, and I really do appreciate that, since he doesn't have to. It's a big reason why, again, clear my throat. Which is why, if you notice, URL, I did let him speak. I'm not, and again, he may be left, but I still try to respect the person. But at the end of the day, he did ramble, and I just tried to, I did try to stick to my points, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here to talk about these other topics. But I heard his point was bad. While I'm here, I might as well do that. There. So, he's pretty. I'm not understanding. Yeah. But hey, although that argument might not be the best argument to have, anti-Musk, but like I said, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Just try to switch that off, give you something new to look at. Yeah, I'm really glad that it was as civil it was. I really am. I was genuinely expecting for it to completely go sideways. But we managed to, and I really dead seriously appreciate that. Because I just honestly was not in the mood for it. Yeah, so was I. Honestly, But that's the thing. Even with flat earthers, give them some respect. At least let them talk and let them explain themselves. They may be entirely wrong. You know what? That may be a possibility. But you still respect the person. And that can often, respecting the person and letting them at least fully explain themselves can often help defuse a situation, prevent it from getting into a shouting match. I'm not saying it can't, I'm not saying it'll stop it all the time, but sure as hell is better than, not respecting them and causing that issue. Yeah. But honestly, the people that are going to be reiterating his information are going to be reiterating any information. If they weren't an anti-SpaceX fan, they'd be reiterating SpaceX facts, from Elon. So it really doesn't matter, in my opinion. Yeah, it's kind of surprising, isn't it, how loud someone can be on another platform, but once you bring them out in person, they may not be as boisterous. I'm not saying that they're cowardly in person, just that maybe that their posts or comments and text can come off with a far different tone than in person. Are you saying you'd like to talk about it on stream URL 86? Oh yeah. Don't put the weakness of a lack of a script against him, because yeah, trust me, I have YouTube videos out there. I'm not going to tell you where they are, but I have YouTube videos where I was unscripted, and although a lot of my information was correct, it was still laid out and explained terribly. I hate those videos. I have not unlisted them. They are still out there. They are under a different name, so you will not find them. Point is, I hate them because they sound awful. So again, don't hold that against him. Because even I have felt that same problem of going without a script and sounding like a dumbass. I have done it myself. Speaking, I'm the first step when you're... just yeah, people that actually follow them and then insult you, Tara, that's just disgustingly low. There's no excuse for it. And don't worry, that's happened to me too, because I'll say something about Starship, and guess what, I'll get that same crap from Starship fans. Although never really in DMs, because thankfully people don't do that. But yeah, trust me, that happens to me a lot. That's never be afraid to give someone, a hug via, a digital hug on Twitter, especially someone that does a lot of debates, because you don't know how hard these debates might actually hit somebody. So, just my thoughts. So, start to wrap this up anyway. He's got a couple of spots coming. Yeah, I saw that. I wouldn't say I don't. Yeah, I didn't want to get into that side crap of conspiracies or the trans crap, because I'm not informed enough to make a decision, nor do I have enough interest. It's not that I hate these people, it's just that when it comes at the end of the day, it's just like, trans people, just do your best and be you. I don't really care, as long as your rights or arguments don't infringe on me, I don't care. Do what you want. I support you, but leave that to somebody else. And because I have that sort of disinterest, that apathy to the subject, I don't feel that I would be confident enough to touch it. Also, conspiracy. Yes, I know, but it's... I didn't have context. You kept saying Amos 6. I did not know what you were referring to. In hindsight, maybe I would have. I'm not entirely certain. Well, it doesn't affect you nearly as much. Yeah. Dead serious though. Never be afraid to give a digital hug out to somebody who does debates. You have no idea how much hearing somebody, say that you're actually worth it and you're a good part of the community means. People have done that for me. You will say, I hope you're having a good day, and I am not lying. That genuinely will flip my entire day around, because I may go from this is really tough and hitting me hard to constantly do this day after day, and then you know, hearing somebody say that can make it so much easier, and just it feels like a load's off you, because you know that at least, if nothing else, all that emotion you put into those discussions, or even if not emotion, at least all that effort, because I try to put my best effort. I'm going to debate you. I'm going to do a good debate and put a lot of effort into it. And hearing somebody say that it's worth it and you're actually doing a good job and you're actually helping, you have no idea how important that is. You think so? Oh yeah. Hold on. Good, I was muted. But yeah. Yeah, I know that conspiracy, somebody informed me of that earlier, but at the end of the day, like I said, I don't know if that was, I don't know, that the whole subject just seems kind of fishy to me. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying he doesn't believe that. I'm just like, I can do flat earth, but that is just like alien level, you know, they're controlling my mind level debates. I know that's a stem on a concept of a hypothetical of a claim, you know, it's such a stem that I can't really work with that out. It ultimately end up being, you know, my throat is killing me. Thank God I have a mute, because that would probably too much talking. You know, stuff building up my throat. And I'm sorry that's disgusting to say. I really need to leave here soon. But yeah, in short, it's a conspiracy. I can't really argue with that. It's just, okay, but what if? That's not likely, you know. That's pretty extreme, you know. That's kind of hard to do. But yeah, regardless, seriously, thank you everybody. This has easily been my most active chat, you know, scrolling through here, and I am so glad to have all of you here, and I really hope you'll show up in the future. And if you guys want to have the same feature, yeah, exactly. I've had a cup of drink here, but I finished 2 cups during the stream. But yeah, if you guys want to talk, I have no problem having guests on these streams. I only do the KSP stuff because it's easiest and I don't have to arrange it, but go ahead. The biggest thing is I just don't want to, I'm okay with having guests, but if you want to have a stream dedicated to you, I just need to have something like a subject, something we're actually going to actively be discussing. So, exactly, KSP is good for background stuff, so. Like I said, if you want to do that, whatever, go ahead, contact me. You know, obviously, I'm constantly on Twitter, so, or if you have me on Discord, go ahead and hit me there. You know, I have no problem doing that. So, in the meantime, again, thank you everybody so much for being here, and again, I hope that this was, enlightening and definitely detailed a lot more, not only about him but also about me. So you got, you know, explained a lot of your questions, and I also explained a lot of, you know, explained more of his perspective, but also mine, you know, if it works out. So, like I said, go ahead and, you know, we can continue discussing this on Twitter, but thank you guys. Seriously, I cannot thank you enough. So, might do it tomorrow. So, I might do a live KSP live stream tomorrow. So, we'll see. Regardless, thank you everybody. Good night.